Chapter 96. Shang Junlin lowered his head and sucked on the lotus seed along with Shan Yu's finger. After biting it gently, he released it. It's very sweet. Shan Yu didn't know if he was referring to the lotus seed or something else. Shan Yu withdrew his hand as if he was scalded. Under the man's increasingly aggressive gaze, his face gradually turned red. You try it. After speaking, Shang Junlin leaned over, pulled the young man under his body, and kissed him. Shan Yu had just eaten the lotus seed. The sweetness of the lotus seed was like sweet dew in his mouth, tempting him to suck on it. The sweetness of the lotus seed lingered between their lips and teeth. Shang Junlin pressed Shan Yu down and deepened the kiss. The lotus leaves had unknowingly leaned to one side and covered their faces. After the kiss, Shang Junlin slightly distanced himself from Shan Yu. One of his hands was still on Shan Yu's back, supporting him from falling down. Shan Yu was panting slightly, and there was a touch of rouge at the corners of his eyes. Shang Junlin's eyes became darker and darker. You! Shan Yu felt Shang Junlin's interest and turned his head. Your Majesty, Eunuch Ming and the others are still on the shore. You! If you lower your voice, they won't find out. Shang Junlin raised his hand and brushed away Shan Yu's messy hair. His fingers lingered. No. Shan Yu refused without thinking. Your Majesty, how many days do you want me to lie down this time? This time, I won't do it like last time. Okay? Shang Junlin knew that he had indeed gone too far that day. Except for not really going in, Shan Yu had been bullied by him from top to bottom. Shan Yu looked around. The place where they were was surrounded by lotus leaves, far from the shore. No one on the shore could see what they were doing. Didn't the imperial physician say that your Majesty should control yourself? Recalling that night, Shan Yu didn't want to agree. He was not averse to this kind of thing, but if it was like last time, then forget it. His body could not withstand Shang Junlin's torment. You, how long has it been since I last messed with you? Shang Junlin lowered his head and rubbed against the young man like a big, clingy dog. Shan Yu was annoyed by him. The two of them were so close together that any of their reactions would be easily detected by the other party. Shang Junlin sensed something and leaned on Shan Yu's shoulder, laughing softly. You wants it too, doesn't she? I don't want to. Shan Yu glared at him. If he hadn't rubbed against him, would he have become like this? Okay, you, I promise, just once, okay? Shang Junlin did not give up. His warm breath sprayed on Shan Yu's neck. Shan Yu had no choice but to relent. Only once, with your hands. Like a dog that had eaten meat, Shang Junlin's eyes suddenly lit up. The unrowed boat swayed gently, ripples of water rippling under the boat. Shan Yu bit her lips to prevent the sound from overflowing. The man's lips lingered on her neck, all the way up, swallowing all the sound into his stomach. The sun gradually set in the west. The palace servants waiting by the shore looked anxiously at the center of the lake from time to time. Mushi looked anxiously for a while and asked, Eunuch Ming, do we need to find Her Majesty in Guejun? It had been so long. Why was there no movement at all? Eunuch Ming could not make up his mind. Without Her Majesty's orders, they could not act rashly. Wait a little longer. If Her Majesty and Guejun do not come out before dark, we will send people to find them. Shan Yu's body moved up and down with the rocking of the boat. She struggled to avoid the man's kiss. Her Majesty said that she would only. I didn't lie. You, be good, come closer. Shang Junlin nibbled the delicate skin on Shan Yu's neck and coaxed in a hoarse voice. He didn't lie, but it took a little longer. Shan Yu was so angry that she bit Shang Junlin. The man paused for a moment, then became even more ruthless. Just as Eunuch Ming was hesitating whether to send the guards to find them, a small boat slowly appeared in front of them. Eunuch Ming took the lead to welcome it. Shang Junlin carried the young man wrapped in a black robe and got off the boat. Eunuch Ming quickly ordered people to stop the boat and walked behind Shang Junlin. Your Majesty, go back first. The man's voice was full of satisfaction. Eunuch Ming tactfully stopped talking and followed behind Shang Junlin with his head lowered. Inadvertently, he saw an arm hanging down from the black robe. The white skin was covered with red marks. Eunuch Ming hurriedly looked away and did not dare to look anymore. Shan Yu was not asleep. His leg only hurt. What surprised him more was that Shang Junlin actually carried those small bottles with him. Why did your majesty bring these? Shinyu half leaned on the bed and played with the jade bottle in his hand. He took it out from Shang Junlin's robe. One bottle was fine, but Shang Junlin actually brought several bottles. The jade bottle was thin and long. As it was played with by the fair and slender fingers, it seemed to have some kind of arousal. Shang Junlin thought of the pair of hands that held him just now. The skin on the palms was tender and slightly cold to the touch. He was addicted to the taste. Your Majesty? Seeing that he was distracted, Shinyu stopped what he was doing. Shang Junlin coughed softly. I just thought that it would be more convenient to carry it with me. What was convenient? Shinyu did not want to think about it. Shang Junlin suddenly reached out and held Shan Yu's hand. Together with the bottle in his hand, he wrapped it in his palm. Do you feel uncomfortable now? I'm fine, except for a few places. This time, it was indeed fine. When he woke up the next day, Shinyu was in good spirits. Except for some places that were still a little uncomfortable, compared to the last time, there were no sequelae. Young Master, Her Majesty sent people to deliver a lot of lotus seeds. Mushi led people to move the lotus seeds into the room. There were indeed a lot. Shinyu counted silently. It was enough for him to eat for a few days. Shang Junlin was still worried about Shinyu, so he called Imperial Physician Gu over the next day. Your Majesty's body is fine, Imperial Physician Gu said after taking his pulse. Shinyu also felt that he was fine. I told you that there was no need to trouble Imperial Physician Gu to make a trip. Let Imperial Physician Gu take a look. I'm more at ease. After that, Imperial Physician Gu was invited to the study to ask about Shan Yu's physical condition in detail. In the middle of the night, Shun Yu was awakened by the noise. Shang Junlin patted his back. I'll go take a look. You can continue sleeping. After that, Shang Junlin put on his coat and went out. Shinyu lay down for a while but couldn't fall asleep. He simply sat up and asked Mu Shi to light the lamp. What's the situation outside? It seems that a minister's residence caught fire. Mu Shi had been waiting outside the room. She heard the news from a palace servant. How could it catch fire? The emperor and important ministers of the imperial court lived in the palace. Which one of them wasn't a noble? The servants were always very careful. It was almost impossible for such a big accident to happen. Shinyu put on a cloak and walked outside. At a glance, he saw the blazing fire. This direction seems to be the residence of a certain aristocratic family. Shinyu muttered, It's the residence of the assistant minister of the Ministry of Revenue. Why did you come out? Shang Junlin walked in from outside and directly pulled Shinyu into his arms. At night, the temperature in the palace was low. Shinyu nestled in the man's arms for a while and gradually felt warm. I couldn't sleep, so I came out to take a look. I've already arranged for someone to put out the fire. Don't worry. Shang Junlin touched Shan Yu's hair. The fire in the palace was not a trivial matter. Whether it was man-made or accidental, it needed to be thoroughly investigated. Shang Junlin sent Shun Yu back to his room to continue resting. He went to meet the ministers. The prime minister and others had been waiting in the study for a while. After Shang Junlin came in, he sat in his seat and knocked on the table. What do you think of tonight's incident? The answer given by Lord Tan is that the servants accidentally knocked down the candle flame and the house burned. Fortunately, it was discovered early and didn't cause too much damage. Who was injured? Except for Miss Tan's face, everyone else is fine. Do you think it was an accident? In my opinion, it doesn't seem like it. Why was Miss Tan the one who was injured, and after such an incident? Because Shang Junlin wanted to punish the chicken to warn the monkey, he didn't hide what happened that day from the public. Now, only a few days after the incident, Miss Tan almost died in the fire. No one would think that it was a coincidence. In the small courtyard of the Tan family, Miss Tan had just been rescued from the fire. She was still in shock and leaned in the arms of a servant girl. She knew better than anyone that tonight's fire was not an accident. If she hadn't been on guard, she wouldn't have been able to walk out alive. She touched the untreated wound on her face, and her eyes were obscure. You're so embarrassing. You even embarrassed yourself in front of His Majesty. If you don't have the life, don't have such ambition. In the end, you'll only implicate us. The Tan family's legitimate daughter looked at Miss Tan condescendingly. Her tone was full of sarcasm. "You're really lucky to be able to escape from such a fire." Miss Tan silently clenched her fists. "Father, in my opinion, we should just send away those careless servants. No one was injured anyway." The Tan family's legitimate daughter had always disliked her younger sister, who was born of a concubine. It wasn't because of the difference between legitimate and concubine, but because her good sister was like her yin-yang. They liked to pretend to be weak. Every time she did something wrong or wanted something, as long as she put on a bullied face, she would get what she wanted. This time, she was even more daring. She went directly to His Majesty and didn't even look at herself. She dared to covet that position. The result was that the Tan family became the laughing stock of everyone. "All right," the assistant minister of the Ministry of Revenue scolded. "Call a doctor for your sister to look at her face." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Revenue didn't want to look at this disgraceful daughter and left with a flick of his sleeve. When he thought of explaining these things to His Majesty, he had a headache. But he couldn't not go. When Shang Junlin returned, the sky was already bright. Xinyu didn't sleep well in the latter half of the night and got up early. The servant made lotus seed porridge and presented it to her. The snow-white lotus seeds floated in the bowl. Xinyu used a spoon to poke at them. "Why are you up so early?" Shang Junlin walked in. "Mu Shi, go and bring a bowl of porridge for His Majesty." After Xinyu gave the order, she answered Shang Junlin's question. "I couldn't sleep. How is the matter being handled?" "For the time being, we only found out that it was an accident." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Revenue also insisted that it was a servant's mistake and didn't intend to investigate further. Shang Junlin sat beside Xinyu. The palace servants quickly brought the lotus seed porridge over. "His Majesty, have some too." Shang Junlin picked up the porridge and finished it in a few bites. Xinyu also put down the bowl and wiped her mouth with a handkerchief. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Revenue is standing at the cusp of the storm. He hopes more than anyone that this is just an accident. After the palace servants finished cleaning up, Shang Junlin pulled Shan Yu's hand and walked to the bed. "You, sleep with me for a while." Xinyu thought that he didn't sleep for most of the night and didn't refuse. After changing clothes, Shang Junlin hugged Xinyu and lay down on the bed. "It's still more comfortable to stay with you." She was soft and fragrant when he hugged her. Even if he didn't do anything, Shang Junlin could hug her for a whole day. On the other side, in the study room with the doors and windows tightly shut, the middle-aged man asked in a deep voice, "How is the matter?" "Rest assured, my lord. I have already spread the news according to your request. When the sky is bright, everything will be as you wish." Chapter 97. Xinyu lay in the man's warm arms and soon fell asleep. Shang Junlin looked down at him. He didn't feel sleepy at first, but after looking at Shan Yu's peaceful sleeping face for a while, he gradually felt sleepy. Not long after, Shang Junlin also fell asleep with him in his arms. After sleeping for a while, Xinyu woke up feeling refreshed. He touched his side and found that Shang Junlin was not there. He must be busy with government affairs. Hearing the noise, Mu Shi came in to serve him. After washing up, Xinyu took a book and asked, "Did something happen? Your expression didn't look right when you came in." Mu Shi pursed her lips and didn't know if she should tell Xinyu. Xinyu rolled up the book and gently knocked on her head. "Tell me, what happened?" "It's outside. People are saying that you ordered someone to set the fire last night." Mu Shi was indignant. "You didn't do anything. How can these people slander you for no reason?" Xinyu restrained the smile on his face and sat on the soft couch with the book. "Tell me the details." "This morning, when I went out, I heard people secretly saying that there was something wrong with the fire last night. Someone deliberately set it to get rid of Miss Tan. Otherwise, why would Miss Tan's room catch fire among so many rooms? It was indeed man-made, but I don't know the real purpose of the person behind the scenes." Xinyu hid the deep thought in his eyes. It's not a big deal for them to talk about this, but for some reason, they all suddenly agreed that it was you who set the fire. They said it was because you couldn't tolerate other people around His Majesty and... Mu Shi couldn't continue. Xinyu picked up the teacup and took a sip. "Continue." "They said that His Majesty originally took a fancy to Miss Tan and wanted to bring her into the palace, but you refused. You even had a big fight with His Majesty and drove Miss Tan out. You also spread rumors to tarnish Miss Tan's reputation. Hearing this, Shun Yu understood that the ultimate target of this fire was him. Does His Majesty know? Shun Yu asked. I found out early this morning. Before His Majesty left, he told us not to disturb your rest. Didn't he tell you not to tell me about this? No. She shook her head. She only told us not to worry if you knew about it. Her Majesty will take care of it. How many people think so now? Other than those who serve here, it's spreading everywhere else. When Mushi heard the rumors, he immediately went outside to inquire about the news. The more he heard, the angrier he became. Young master, don't worry. His Majesty has already sent people to deal with it. Shun Yu shook his head. For this kind of thing, if we can't come up with a truth that is enough to convince them, it won't really stop. As the saying goes, 3 men make a tiger. Even if he didn't do it, the more people who talked about it, the more they would implicate him. This was probably one of the motives of the mastermind. Shun Yu was right. Even though Shang Junlin ordered people not to talk about it in private, the rumors didn't disappear immediately. Instead, they spread more and more. Not only in the temporary imperial residence, but also in the capital. Shang Junlin received the secret message from the hidden dragon guards. His eyes were clouded, and the air pressure around him was getting lower and lower. Call the Tan family members over. Eunuch Ming didn't dare to delay. He called the Tan family members over as fast as he could. Official Tan and Miss Tan, who had just had ointment applied on her face, came over. Have you heard the rumors outside? Shang Junlin sat on the throne and said coldly, Your Majesty, I am innocent. Official Tan knelt down in fear. I don't know where the rumors came from. I can swear that I didn't do it. I don't know anything. Miss Tan knelt down silently and didn't say anything. Is that so? Shang Junlin's voice was indiscernible. Then why did the rumors come from the servants of the Tan family? I really don't know. Your Majesty, please understand. Official Tan kowtowed heavily. There was only fear in his heart. When he heard the rumors, Official Tan's heart turned cold. Even if he was given 10 guts, he wouldn't have dared to spread such rumors. Everyone knew that Shen Guijun was His Majesty's most beloved person. Was he trying to court death by doing such a thing? Shang Junlin also knew that Official Tan didn't do it. Official Tan didn't have the guts to do it. He turned to look at one of the people involved. Did you notice anything wrong last night? This humble girl is certain that someone wants this humble girl's life. The lady, whose expression couldn't be seen clearly, suddenly raised her head. Last night, after I fell asleep, I vaguely felt that someone was walking around in the room. There was also a conversation that was suppressed. I didn't hear what they were saying. Not long after, the room was on fire. There is one more thing. I don't know if it counts. Before I fell asleep last night, an unfamiliar servant girl brought me a bowl of bloody swallow's nest. She said that my father saw that I was injured and specially sent someone to bring it to me. I felt that something was wrong, so I didn't eat the bowl of swallow's nest. I didn't dare to sleep too deeply at night. If she ate the swallow's nest and it happened to be drugged with sleeping pills, she would most likely have died in the fire. Shang Junlin ordered people to watch over the Tan family. There were many suspicious points in this matter, especially when it involved Shun Yu. Shang Junlin couldn't remain rational. Your Majesty, don't frown. Shun Yu reached out and smoothed out the wrinkles between the man's eyebrows. Shang Junlin took the opportunity to hug Shun Yu. He buried his head in his neck and took a deep breath. I would rather they wanted to deal with me. His Yu was so good that he didn't dare to hurt her in the slightest. Those people were bold and directly used such a vicious method to deal with him. The more Shang Junlin thought about it, the lower the pressure around him became. When he caught those people, he would definitely let them know what it meant to live a life worse than death. Shen Yu stroked Shang Junlin's back. All right, Your Majesty, don't be angry. There is nothing to be angry about. It was just slander. What kind of words had he not heard before? When he worked for King Yu in his previous life, he had been scolded by all kinds of people. Compared to that, this was nothing. I won't allow them to talk about a Yu like that. A Yu is so good. How can I let them slander her? They don't deserve it. Shun Yu's heart warmed. She relaxed in the man's arms. Does your majesty know who did it? Shang Junlin didn't have many clues. Your majesty, do you want to know who did it? Shen Yu blinked her eyes. You knows? Shang Junlin raised his head and looked at him curiously. I don't know now, but I will know soon. Shen Yu smiled and whispered into Shang Junlin's ear. You is really... Shang Junlin laughed. Your majesty, just do what you need to do. As for the rest, you just need to lend me a few hidden dragon guards. This matter was not only limited to the officials on the surface. Shang Junlin had also instructed the hidden dragon guards to investigate. The Tan family was placed under surveillance, and every servant was interrogated. Their hard work paid off. They finally found a clue. The rumors became more and more intense. It was to the point where they could hear people talking about it everywhere they went. Everything is going according to your expectations. I believe that in time, your wish will come true. The subordinate complimented him. You have done well this time. After this matter is settled, the things that I promised you will belong to you. Thank you, your majesty. The subordinate was delighted. You may leave. Keep an eye on the situation outside.
Yes.
Imperial physician Gu and Gu Huai also heard the discussion about this matter. I believe that your majesty is not such a person. Imperial physician Gu had been in contact with Shen Yu for a period of time. He trusted Shen Yu's character. Brother is right. If your majesty really wants to deal with Miss Tan, why would he use such a stupid method? In the short period of time that they had spent together, Gu Huai clearly understood that Shen Yu was not a fool who would do such a stupid thing because of jealousy. It is probably to sow discord between your majesty and your majesty. Your majesty has been in the palace for so long and has always dominated your majesty. Your majesty also dotes on your majesty and refuses to take in concubines. Those who want to send their daughters to stabilize their status can no longer sit still. Imperial physician Gu sighed. I don't know if your majesty will believe your majesty. Those people don't think about it. If your majesty doesn't like them, what's the use of sending them into the palace? They will not get any benefits and will be implicated instead. Gu Huai was very disdainful of this kind of behavior that used women to gain status and power. It is a pity that some people are blinded by power and will never understand this point. Gu Huai nodded in agreement. The people behind the scenes wanted to wait until the day when Shen Yu would be neglected by Shang Junlin. Unfortunately, after waiting and waiting, Shen Yu and Shang Junlin got along as usual. Even Shang Junlin was more clingy than before because he was worried about Shen Yu. This was different from what he had imagined. When the people behind the scenes saw the news from their informants, they were so angry that they wanted to vomit blood. Darren, your majesty summons you. A servant's voice came from outside the room. He hurriedly put away the letter beside him and strode out of the room. When he arrived, he found that there was no one else except for Shang Junlin and Shen Yu. Your majesty, your majesty. Shang Junlin didn't say anything, so he could only kneel. Gradually, uneasiness surged in his heart. Darren I don't think there is much hatred between you and me, right? Shen Yu's calm voice broke the silence. Darren Yi's heart palpitated. I don't know what your majesty is talking about. Otherwise, why would Darren Yi commit arson and injure people and point all the evidence to me? Shen Yu looked at him calmly. The uneasiness in Darren Yi's heart gradually increased. He forced himself to remain calm and said, even if you are your majesty, you can't slander a court official. He did it very cleanly. Even if he gave himself away, he would only point all the evidence to Shen Yu. It would be impossible for him to be discovered. Whether it is the truth or slander, Darren knows better than anyone else. If you don't want people to know, don't do it in the first place. Shen Yu stood up and walked in front of the kneeling man. Darren has read so many books. Don't you understand this simple principle? It seems that Darren still refuses to admit it. Shen Yu sighed in distress. Darren is so confident that we won't be able to find any evidence. Darren stiffened his neck and didn't speak. In fact, we won't be able to find anything. Who asked Darren to personally send the evidence to us? The blood swallow's nest is such a precious tonic. Darren Tan would never give it to a concubine's daughter who brought shame to the family. Not every aristocratic family has the family's background. Of course, One swallow's nest doesn't mean anything. What if we add this? Shinyu took out a rolled-up piece of paper from his sleeve. There was a special pattern printed at the end of the paper. It was used by Darren E. to send messages to the capital. How did you get this? Darren E. reached out to take it, but Shinyu withdrew his hand. Now you are willing to admit it? Chapter 98. Lord Yi's actions were tantamount to admitting Shan Yu's words. His expression changed again and again as he slowly retracted his hand. He had seen the seal on the paper very clearly. It was used to contact the people in the capital. The detailed arrangements to incite the people to slander Shin Yu were all sent to the people in the capital through this seal. Now that Shin Yu was holding one of them. Did he have the other one as well? This was not the only thing he had written in the letter to the capital. There were many other things that could not be known by outsiders. Lord Yi's face turned ashen when he thought of the consequences if His Majesty found out. Do you admit to your crimes? Lord Yi, who had been immersed in his thoughts, was startled awake by the cold voice. He looked forward in panic. After a moment, he kowtowed heavily. I admit to my crimes. As expected, Shinyu put away the letter in his hand and walked slowly back to Shang Junlin's side. He sat down. Why are you targeting me? As far as I know, the Yi family has no plans to send their children into the palace. After the incident with the Tan girl, Shang Junlin had sent people to investigate which worlds had taken action. The Yi family was not among them. It could be said that the Yi family had never had such thoughts. Lord Yi was silent. Shinyu cracked his fingers. Let me guess. It's because of Yi Jiaming? Since there was no conflict of interest in the harem, he must have done something unfavorable to the Yi family elsewhere. Shinyu searched his memories. This was the only thing that matched. Yi Jiaming was stripped of his imperial results and will never be able to become an official. Your family spent a lot of effort to nurture him. Unfortunately, before he could do anything for the family, he was abandoned. You were unhappy and targeted me. Do you think that if I had not appeared at the Chonglin banquet, His Majesty would not have punished Yi Jiaming? Shun Yu's every word pierced through Lord Yi's heart. He had never failed like this in his entire life. Yi Jiaming was the child he valued the most. He liked him the most among the younger generation of the Yi family. Yi Jiaming's intelligence was not inferior to others. He had high hopes for his successor, but because of a small matter, he was ruined. How could he take this lying down? After that incident, although Yi Jiaming did not suffer any physical injuries, the child's mental state had undergone a huge change. He was muddle-headed all day long and did not look like a young master of an aristocratic family at all. As for the people who went to the Chonglin banquet with Yi Jiaming, of course, he did not let them go. They were just some small family clans that relied on the Yi family. It would be easy to deal with them. Since Your Majesty and Your Highness already know everything, I have nothing more to say. Lord Yi slumped to the ground. Shinyu was not surprised that they would make a move against Zhang Huiqing, who seemed to have no foundation at all. The imperial court was like this. It was always accompanied by mutual deception, open strife, and covert struggle. Political opponents fought to the death. The imperial court seemed to be stable now, but it was the result of Shang Junlin's efforts to balance the situation. I want to know, how did Your Highness get the letter? The thing that made Lord Yi unable to quibble was the rolled-up letter that Shinyu took out. He would only choose his most trusted subordinates to send letters. Once they found out, they would destroy the letter at all costs. No one else knew how the letter was sent. How did the letter end up in Shan Yu's hands? Lord Yi was puzzled. You're asking about this? Shin Yu's eyes swept downwards. What do you think? Lord Yi was taken away by the guards waiting outside. Before he left, he did not get a reply from Shun Yu. Of course, Shin Yu wouldn't tell him that he was the one who used the letter to scare him. A Yu's imitation skills are really good. Shang Junlin's hand reached into Shun Yu's sleeve and took out the letter that made Lord Yi's expression change greatly. His fingertips slid across her soft skin, causing her to tremble. Shang Junlin hugged Shin Yu from behind. Then, he wrapped his arms around her waist and stretched them forward to unfold the letter. If Lord Yi was here and saw the letter being unfolded, he would definitely scold them for being shameless. Besides the pattern that Shin Yu drew at the end of the letter, there was nothing else on the letter. In the beginning, They did not have any clue about the mastermind behind this incident. Later, Shang Junlin listened to Xian Yu's suggestion and asked the hidden dragon guards to secretly search for the mastermind behind this incident. They really caught the person who delivered the message. However, when the person realized that he had been discovered, he immediately destroyed the letter. The hidden dragon guards brought back the news and the destroyed letter. Xin Yu pieced together the pattern and created a similar letter. However, a fake letter was still a fake. If Lordy was not distracted by Xin Yu's words, he might have realized that something was wrong. Unfortunately, there was no if. The rumors in the capital have been controlled. Now that the mastermind has been found, it's time to deal with the situation in the palace. If Xin Yu did not want to lure the mastermind out, Shang Junlin would not have allowed the rumors to circulate in the palace for so many days. How does your majesty plan to deal with this? Xin Yu's wrist was held. The man's calloused fingertips caressed the inside of his wrist, causing him to feel numb. If it was in the past, Shang Junlin would definitely kill the person who spread the rumors. However, he knew that Shan Yu did not like this. After a moment of silence, he asked, "How does you plan to deal with them?" Xin Yu turned and looked at Shang Junlin. "Your Majesty can do whatever you want with the leaders. As for the rest of them, they will be fined 1 year's salary as a warning to others." The rumors disappeared as quickly as they appeared. In less than half a day, no one in the palace dared to talk about it anymore. As for the capital, Shang Junlin had already ordered people to suppress the rumors. The people in the capital were not as gullible as Lord Yi thought. After what Lord Yi had done spread to the capital, everyone was enlightened. I said before that Lord Yi would not do such a thing. Look, the results are out now. Lord Yi was indeed framed. This Lord Yi, could it be that he is related to Yi Jianming, who was jealous of a poor student and wanted to get his results revoked? They both have the surname Yi. What do you think? No wonder he wanted to slander Lord Yi. If it was not for Lord Yi, that poor student would have been bullied by others. His words were met with agreement. There were many aristocratic families in the capital, but there were even more ordinary people. These aristocratic families were used to being superior and thought that they were superior. The ordinary people did not have a good impression of them. Compared with the aristocratic families, they were more likely to bring in poor students. Not only this, have you forgotten that fraud was discovered in time before the imperial examination? It was Lord Yi who discovered it first. Lord Yi is so considerate. How could he kill a woman because of jealousy? When those words were first spread, I felt that something was wrong. Before Lord Yi entered the palace, His Majesty's harem did not have many women. After Lord Yi entered the palace, His Majesty said that he only wanted Lord Yi in this life. How could he like another woman in the blink of an eye and take her into his harem? If His Majesty really wanted to, his harem would have been full. A few years ago, the ministers did mention this matter. Don't you think it is suspicious? So there is no such thing as His Majesty taking in new people. Since there is no such thing, Lord Yi's jealousy and arson cannot be established. I have a cousin who works in an aristocratic family. Did you know that a few days ago, the aristocratic family was reprimanded by His Majesty? The reason was that a woman from an aristocratic family deliberately got close to His Majesty and was punished. The person who punished her was not Lord Yi, but His Majesty himself. At this point, everything that should be understood was clear. The cause and effect relationship was wrong from the beginning. Since this was the case, no matter how dignified the reason behind it was, it would not hold water. Restaurants and tea houses were all talking about this matter. Under the deliberate influence of some people, the wind quickly reversed. The truth is finally out. I knew that brother Yu was not that kind of person. Jiang Huiqing heard the discussion downstairs and poured a cup of wine for himself. He Qingyu picked up the wine cup and took a sip. The relationship between His Majesty and Lord Yi is stronger than gold. It is not something that can be casually interfered with. That's right. I don't know what these aristocratic families are thinking. His Majesty has already made it clear that he will not fill up the harem, but they still don't stop. Since ancient times, wealth and power have moved people's hearts. What they want is the power behind His Majesty. The aristocratic family's appetite is getting bigger and bigger. Jiang Huiqing knew this as well. Only after stepping into the imperial court did he realize that the interior of the Great Huan dynasty was vastly different from what he had imagined. The seemingly stable exterior was only supported by a strong pillar. Once this pillar collapsed, it was only a matter of time before the Great Huan dynasty collapsed. He also understood why His Majesty would put poor officials in important positions. It was not because he liked them, but because the court had been controlled by the aristocratic families for a long time. If there was no power to oppose them, the imperial power would become a joke sooner or later. Officially he was sent back early, and the crimes he committed were also announced to the world. The Yi family's power in the capital was quickly divided up by other aristocratic families. The competition between aristocratic families is even worse than that between aristocratic families and poor families. If you think that they will be united, then you are gravely mistaken. Xunyu put down a white piece. Under the shade of a tree, Shang Junlin and Xunyu sat opposite each other. Between them was a red sandalwood chessboard. Shang Junlin had specially ordered the palace servants to find it in the storeroom. Shang Junlin held a black piece and put it down. In fact, the aristocratic families and the imperial family are not much different. In the previous dynasty, during the war, there was a saying that the aristocratic families are made of iron and the imperial family is flowing water. Before De Huan was founded, this land had experienced 100 years of war. It was not until De Huan was founded that the situation improved. Your Majesty, I am going to win. On the chessboard, as the last white piece was put down, the situation instantly reversed. The white pieces, which were originally at a disadvantage, quickly surrounded the black pieces and cut off all their escape routes. Shang Junlin threw back the piece in his hand and said crisply, I admit defeat. Your Majesty, you have lost today. You have to keep your word. Of course, I will not disturb you tonight. Xunyu breathed a sigh of relief. Seeing that his body did not have any abnormalities after that time, Shang Junlin wanted to disturb him every time. He called it getting used to it. Xunyu felt that he did not want to get used to this kind of thing. Your Majesty, Eunuch Ming walked over quickly with a rare look of panic on his face. Sun Zhao, official Sun wants to see you. Let him come in to see me. Eunuch Ming took the order and left. Not long after, a slightly embarrassed man in his 30s came in. Your Majesty, the north is suffering from a drought. Your Majesty, please send relief as soon as possible. Chapter 99. Subei was the name of several cities in the northern part of the Great Huan dynasty. In the early years, Shang Junlin had left some men there to fight. Later, when he returned to the capital and shifted his focus, he did not completely let go. Officials like Sun Zhao were all arranged by him to stay in Subei. What's going on? Shang Junlin did not receive any news of the drought in Subei. Otherwise, he would not have stayed in the temporary imperial residence as if nothing had happened. Mu Shi, first serve official Sun a pot of tea. Xunyu saw that Sun Zhao was travel-worn. It was obvious that he had rushed back. Sun Zhao was indeed thirsty. When Mu Shi brought the tea over, he did not refuse and directly drank it in one gulp. Only then did he slowly explain the situation in Subei. 3 months ago, it rarely rained in Subei, but at that time, it would occasionally rain a little. Subei has always been like this, so this subject did not take it to heart. Until a month ago, Subei began to have continuous sunny days. For a month, there was not a single drop of rain. The crops could not withstand the drought and died one after another. The people in Subei were short of food. This subject had no other choice but to take out a portion of the army's rations to help the people and send a memorial to the imperial court in hopes of receiving some assistance. Subei was an important pass in the northern part of the Great Huan dynasty. If the Subei army was not stationed there all year round, it would be easy for the nomads to invade the Great Huan dynasty. However, the living conditions in Subei were very bad. There was little rain and drought all year round. If the Subei army was not stationed there and the imperial court sent a batch of supplies there every year, it would be very difficult for ordinary people to survive. We did not receive your memorial. Shang Junlin's voice was cold. No one knew where the memorial requesting for disaster relief was now. This subject also guessed that the memorial might not have been delivered, so I rushed back. This subject returned to the capital without being summoned and is willing to accept punishment. Sun Zhao had been by Shang Junlin's side since before he ascended the throne. He naturally knew that Shang Junlin could not ignore Subei. There was only one possibility for him, not to receive a reply from the imperial court after waiting for so many days. His memorial did not reach Shang Junlin's hands. Shang Junlin knocked on the stone table. "This is an urgent matter. We will arrange for someone to go to Subei. You can go and rest first." This was his action when he was thinking. Before Sun Zhao came here, he was prepared to be condemned. His confidants had repeatedly advised him not to take the risk. If his memorial reached His Majesty's hands and nothing happened here, he would only end up not being able to return. Of course, Sun Zhao knew that he could afford to wait, but Subei couldn't. Neither the army nor the people of Subei could afford to wait. He took out the booklet that he had been keeping in his bosom. This subject has written down the disaster situation in Subei. Eunuch Ming took the booklet and presented it to Shang Junlin. "We understand. Meng Chong, bring Lord Sun to the west courtyard. Don't spread what happened today." "Your servant obeys." "What do you think, Your Majesty?" Xin Yu was not in the capital at this time in his previous life. He also fell seriously ill, so he did not know much about what happened this summer. As for the book he read after his death, it was written from Shan Xingran's perspective. The only description of this period of time was that he was bullied in the palace. Sun Zhao would not lie about this kind of thing. Not only Sun Zhao, but we also did not receive any memorials from any other officials in Subei. It seems that there is a big problem in Subei. If there is a problem with the officials in Subei, this matter is not as simple as just disaster relief. We will send the hidden dragon guards to investigate. As for the specifics, we will decide when the hidden dragon guards return. Shang Junlin flipped open the booklet. The more he read, the tighter his frown became. The disaster in Subei was more serious than expected. Starving people were everywhere, and people were swapping their children for food. Every scene was shocking. Shang Junlin was holding Shunyu when he read the booklet. Xinyu also happened to read the description on the booklet. When Sun Zhao wrote the booklet, he did not put too much personal emotion into it. He tried to write it as calmly and directly as possible. He only revealed a trace of emotion when he could not control it. It was precisely this kind of emotion that was revealed when he was suppressed to the extreme that could touch people's hearts. "Your Majesty, let's arrange the disaster relief first. Otherwise, Subei would collapse on its own before the enemy attacked." Shang Junlin had already made a decision in his heart. He rested his head on Shan Yu's shoulder and rubbed his face against Shun Yu. "We originally wanted to have fun here for a few days. After such a thing happened, they must return to the palace immediately. After all, there were many inconveniences in the temporary imperial residence. As long as I'm with Your Majesty, it's the same everywhere." Xin Yu rubbed against him back. That night, Shang Junlin ordered them to return to the capital ahead of time. The ministers also knew about the incident in Subei and packed up their belongings as quickly as possible. Early the next morning, the mighty group sped up and returned to the capital. Xin Yu sat in the carriage and lifted the curtain to look outside. They had only stayed in the temporary imperial residence for 20 days. If they returned now, the capital would still be very hot. After going down the mountain, the temperature gradually increased. Xin Yu changed into thin clothes and put a small basin of ice in the carriage, but she still felt very hot. The first half of August was one of the hottest periods in the capital. Originally, they would stay in the temporary imperial residence until the end of August and return when the capital was not so hot. However, their plan could not keep up with the changes. After such a big incident in Subei, they could only return to the capital ahead of time. The ministers did not dare to complain. They all knew the importance of Subei. Compared to temporary enjoyment, they certainly wanted long-term stability. They did not want to experience the turbulent situation when the previous emperor was on the throne again. The capital received the news early. The Ministry of Revenue prepared disaster relief materials according to Shang Junlin's decree. When the large group returned to the capital, the Ministry of Revenue had already taken care of everything. Although the Minister of Revenue was very stingy when the Minister of Works asked for money, when it came to disaster relief, he would not hesitate to spend more money. Shang Junlin summoned the ministers for a meeting, so Shun Yu returned to Yuzhong Palace. Even if the master was not there, everything in Yuzhong Palace was the same as before. Shin Yu looked at the pots of flowers that were growing well and sat by the window. Did something like this happen in his previous life? How was it resolved in the end? In that book, Shun Xingran's incident in the Imperial Palace was only briefly mentioned. Shin Yu could only recall the memories of his previous life over and over again. It was already 9 months later when he recovered from the serious illness. It was said that the tyrant killed many ministers and his reputation among the people fell a step. What about before that? His memories seemed to be covered by a layer of fog. He could not see clearly. Gongzi, do you want to try the new snacks made by the kitchen? Mu Shi's words pulled Shan Yu's thoughts back. Shin Yu looked at the colorful glass bowl that Mu Shi was holding. What is it? I heard that it was inspired by Miss Shin Yu. It was made with fresh fruits and small ice cubes. Knowing that Gongzi likes sweet things, they also added honey in it. Shin Yu was curious about the snacks made of ice cubes. Let me see. The bowl was only the size of a palm. When it was close, Shin Yu found that the bowl was transparent. It was just that the color was darker and could not be seen from a distance. This bowl. Shin Yu took the bowl in his hand. His fingertips touched a piece of ice cold. In the bowl, there were fine ice cubes and small pieces of various fruits. Under the droplets of water that had not yet fallen, they were bright and juicy. They looked very appetizing. This glass bowl is a newly made product. It is said that it was made according to Shun Yu's recipe. I heard that Miss Shun Yu has a whole set of transparent and colorless bowls. It is just that the shape is very strange. It must be the glass that Shin Yu mentioned before. Shin Yu took a spoonful of fruit and put it into his mouth. It was cold when it entered his mouth. The freshness of the fruit did not decrease because of the coldness. Instead, it had a different taste. Moreover, it was cold and very comfortable to eat. It is indeed a pleasure to eat such snacks in summer. Go and ask the kitchen to make more. I will send some to His Majesty later. Unconsciously, Shun Yu had finished a whole bowl of snacks. He was somewhat unsatisfied, but he also knew that his body did not allow him to eat more. Yes, after eating some ice drinks, Shun Yu was not as agitated as before. He simply took a pen and paper and painted aimlessly. Shun Yu was proficient in zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting. In his previous life, in order to better help the king of Yu, he learned everything that he could. No matter how much Count Jinbei did not care about him, the son of the first wife, he still found a teacher to teach him the things that the children of aristocratic families should learn because it involved the face of the Count Jinbei's family. No matter how unwilling concubine Ru was, she could not disobey Count Jinbei's decision. Later, in order to win over the reclusive great scholars, Shin Yu put in a lot of effort and learned these things to the extreme. Although he was reborn, the things that he learned in his previous life were still deeply imprinted in his mind. Outside the window, birds were chirping. Inside the room, the young man in blue was sitting by the window and concentrating on painting. The painting paper covered the table. Shang Junlin approached with light footsteps. He did not want to disturb this scene. On the rice paper, there were a large number of scattered peach blossoms. It seemed to be without any order, but if one looked carefully, one could see the abundant spring in it. When did your majesty come? Shin Yu put down the pen and saw Shang Junlin standing by the table. Why didn't you call me? Look at how serious you are painting. Ayu's peach blossoms are very beautiful. The ink was not dry, so Shang Junlin could only look at it in a flat position. I just painted a little. Shun Yu rubbed his wrist and stood up. He looked at the sky. He had been painting for almost 2 hours. Shang Junlin consciously walked over and rubbed Shan Yu's wrist. He was very good at doing this. Today, the small kitchen made some new snacks. They taste very good. Your Majesty, do you want to try some? Shin Yu asked Mu Shi to go to the small kitchen and get some snacks. Shang Junlin did not have a strong appetite. After Shun Yu entered the palace, he tasted a lot of new foods with Shun Yu. He knew how good Shun Yu's tongue was. Anything that could be praised by him must be delicious. Mu Shi brought over 2 glazed bowls, one big and one small. Shin Yu looked at the big bowl in front of Shang Junlin and the small bowl in front of him. He raised his eyebrows and said, Mu Shi, it's not good to side with Her Majesty so openly, right? Young master, don't make fun of this servant. Imperial Physician Gu said that you should eat less food that is too cold. A small bowl was the limit. Although Shang Junlin spoiled him, when it came to Shun Yu's health, he insisted on his principles more than anyone else. Shin Yu saw that it was hopeless to change the small bowl to the big one, so he focused on eating in his bowl. Shang Junlin found it funny. Your Majesty, why do you keep looking at me? Shin Yu looked up and saw that Shang Junlin kept looking at him. The fruit in his bowl did not decrease much. He sighed in his heart. If he did not eat, he could give it to him. Shang Junlin slowly fed him a mouthful of fresh fruit. His eyes did not leave Shun Yu throughout the whole process. The man's eyes were burning, as if he was not eating fruit, but something delicious. The man's eyes lingered on his face and lingered on his lips for a long time. Shun Yu was restless under his gaze. The coldness in his mouth could not alleviate the heat that kept surging up. Shin Yu's bowl was empty. He felt uneasy under the increasingly hot gaze, so he got up and wanted to leave. The sudden force from his wrist dragged him back. Before he could react, the man in his arms had already kissed him. Something cold was passed into his mouth. You? Is it delicious? Chapter 100. Extreme Heat and Extreme Heat Intertwined. The ice was not big, but it occupied the remaining space. Shin Yu had no place to put her tongue, so she could only dance with it. There was no way to retreat. The ice gradually melted in her warm mouth and slid down from her slightly open lips. Shang Junlin let go of Shun Yu and licked the water off her chin. Shin Yu leaned on the man's arm and panted slightly. It's really delicious. The man's lips were close to Shun Yu's skin. His voice was slightly hoarse, and his words came through the gap. Shin Yu only felt that the heat on her body was getting more and more obvious. She ate ice, but she only felt heat. Your Majesty, let go of me. It's so hot. Shun Yu steadied her breathing for a while and pushed the arm that was tightly wrapped around her waist. Shang Junlin's body temperature was too high, like a big heater. This kind of temperature was very comfortable to hug in winter, but it was very uncomfortable in summer, especially now that it was the hottest time in Dahuan. Although there was ice in the room, in order to take care of Shun Yu's body, there was not much ice. The two hugged for a while, and it only made them feel hot from inside out. Shang Junlin saw that Shun Yu's face was red, and a layer of fine sweat appeared on his forehead. He had no choice but to loosen his grip a little. You? Why are you so afraid of heat? Were you like this in the past? Shun Yu was stunned by Shang Junlin's question. She couldn't help but ask herself in her heart, was she also afraid of heat in the past? She didn't think so. In her previous life, she was only afraid of the cold. Winter was very difficult to endure, but when summer came, she was not like now. I wasn't like this in the past. Shin Yu looked at Shang Junlin. Before entering the palace, I shouldn't be so afraid of heat. Shang Junlin raised his hand and stroked Shun Yu's face. Her white cheeks were dyed light pink, and her temperature was indeed a little high. In comparison, Shang Junlin's hand was colder. It felt very comfortable to touch her burning face. Shin Yu unconsciously tilted her head and rubbed against his hand. She squinted her eyes slightly like a delicate cat. Let the people from the Imperial Institute of Medicine come and take a look. Shang Junlin held Shun Yu's face and gently bit his lips. Imperial Physician Gu was invited over. Before they arrived at Yuzhong Palace, the palace servant who invited them had already informed Imperial Physician Gu of Shun Yu's situation as instructed. The more Imperial Physician Gu listened, the tighter his brows became. There must be a demon behind this abnormality. It seemed that there was nothing wrong with Shun Yu's sudden fear of heat. In fact, with Shun Yu's physique, he shouldn't be so afraid of heat. Imperial Physician Gu carefully checked Shun Yu's pulse, but he still couldn't find anything wrong with his pulse. Looking at Imperial Physician Gu's expression, Shin Yu knew that the result this time was the same as before. Other than the sudden fear of heat, there was no other discomfort in his body. Actually, there is another possibility. Imperial Physician Gu pondered for a moment. After a period of recuperation, Gu Jun's body gradually returned to normal. It is normal for him to be afraid of heat. In the past, Gue Jun's body was disturbed by cold air. No matter how hot the outside world was, it would be offset by the cold air. Since he couldn't find any other reason, Shang Junlin temporarily believed Imperial Physician Gu's words. After a while, the sky was already dark. After instructing Eunuch Meng to send Imperial Physician Gu away, Shang Junlin picked up Shen Yu and pressed his forehead against Shan Yu's. I hope everything is as Imperial Physician Gu said. Shen Yu patted the back of his neck. I'm really fine. I've never really felt the summer temperature of Dahuan's capital. Maybe it's because my body can't adapt to it that I'm more afraid of heat than ordinary people. Shang Junlin reluctantly believed this explanation and grunted. Shen Yu purposely changed the topic. Your Majesty, has the candidate for disaster relief been decided? The Imperial Court is still discussing it. Jin intends to send Fang Jun. Shang Junlin sat down with Shen Yu in his arms to enter the cabinet. Fang Jun's current achievements are still a bit lacking. Fang Darren is fair and honest. It's good that he's going to Subei. The aristocratic families won't let go of this opportunity. Yu is right. The aristocratic families have repeatedly failed and can't sit still. If there isn't a member of the aristocratic families among the officials sent to Subei, they won't easily agree. Does Your Majesty want them to go? The matter of Subei can't be delayed. Jin doesn't want to waste too much time on this matter. If they are willing to do a good job, Jin will naturally reward them well. The ministers all knew the importance of Subei. They didn't encounter any resistance in organizing disaster relief. Although the aristocratic families and the humble families had accumulated grievances for a long time, they wouldn't ignore the big picture in this matter. Those who didn't care about the big picture had already been dealt with by Shang Junlin. Those who were able to stay until now didn't allow themselves to make major mistakes. They may have their own thoughts, but in the face of such a matter, no matter how many thoughts they had, they would be well hidden. The officials who would go to Subei to provide disaster relief were quickly determined. With Fang Jun as the leader, an official from the aristocratic families as the assistant, and a few other minor officials, the group paid their respects to the emperor at the palace gates and headed to Subei with supplies. Considering the internal problems of Subei, Sun Zhao returned to Subei first. Only his confidants knew that he came to the capital with a light carriage. In order to avoid alerting the enemy, he didn't show his face in the capital. Other than Fang Darren, the other ministers didn't know that the report about the disaster in Subei was personally delivered by Sun Zhao to Shang Junlin. Not long after Fang Darren left, the capital was hit by a rain. The high temperature was finally dispelled a little. After the rain, the weather was cool and refreshing. Shen Yu and Shang Junlin changed into casual clothes and left the palace. Shen Yu planned to take a look at the operation of the shops. The carriage clattered on the bluestone paved road and passed through the alleys. In the carriage, Shen Yu sat beside Shang Junlin and talked to him about the shops. Some of the shops in my hands were left to me by my mother. These shops are the same as the manor. They didn't go through Zhenbei Ho's hands and were directly handed over to me. The rest of the shops were awarded to me when I was conferred the title of Noble Lord, and some were given to me by Zhenbei Ho before I entered the palace. Although Zhenbei Ho's mansion was declining, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. After generations of accumulation, Zhenbei Ho had a lot of good things in his hands. When Shen Yu entered the palace after concubine Ru's marriage, Zhenbei Ho was worried that he would be resentful and gave him 3 times more dowry than usual. Of course, Shen Yu wouldn't refuse free things. He took as much as Zhenbei Ho gave him. I haven't seen these shops since I entered the palace. Since I came out with Your Majesty today, I can take Your Majesty to see them. Shen Yu was in a hurry when he entered the palace. After the shops were given to him, he didn't have time to check them one by one. He could only hand them over to his subordinates to handle. The account books were handed to Shen Yu through Mu Shi every month. Even if Shen Yu didn't have a chance to see them, he had a certain understanding of the situation of these shops. As the emperor, Shang Junlin had a lot of assets. There were special officials in charge of these, so he didn't need to worry about them. After a while, the carriage stopped in front of a shop that sold the 4 treasures of the study. Shen Yu and Shang Junlin got off the carriage and stood outside. They saw the words Wenxian Pavilion written on the plaque. This handwriting. Shang Junlin looked at it for a moment and whispered in Shen Yu's ear, Did you write it? When the man spoke, his hot breath hit her earlobe. Shinyu reached out and touched it. I wrote it casually. I didn't expect them to use it as a plaque. You, when are you going to write some for me? Shinyu felt his fingers being rubbed by something soft. He nodded. Your Majesty can write anything you want. Let's go in first. Although this shop wasn't on the busiest street in the capital, there were a lot of people coming and going nearby. Shinyu could feel people looking at them from time to time. Shang Junlin chuckled and let him go. He held Shan Yu's hand and walked into the shop. As soon as they entered the shop, they could feel that this shop was different from other shops. A light incense lingered in the shop. Because they sold the 4 treasures of the study, the decoration of the shop was very elegant. Brushes, ink, paper, and inkstone were arranged in different categories. When they came in, they could directly choose what they wanted. The decoration of this shop is very novel. There were shelves that were about the height of a person in the room. The shelves were separated by a partition. Brushes, ink, paper, and inkstone were placed on the partition for people to choose from. Customer, you have good taste. This arrangement is specially ordered by the boss. If you want anything, you can go to the special area to take a look. Look over there. That's the experience area. After you choose what you want, you can experience it there. On the other side, there's also a rest area. If you're tired, you can take a rest. The waiter in a uniform green robe introduced them one by one. Let's see it ourselves. The waiter tactfully retreated to the side. Shinyu walked around with Shang Junlin and picked a little of each item. This paper is interesting. In front of Shang Junlin were 2 kinds of rice paper in light blue and light pink. The former was printed with a light green bamboo, and the latter was printed with a large piece of blooming peony. They were placed in exquisite wooden boxes. Shinyu took a box of light blue paper and called the waiter. Where's your boss? He said that a young master surnamed Yu is looking for him. The waiter had never seen Shinyu before, but he knew that Shinyu and Shang Junlin had an extraordinary aura. He had been in the shop for a long time and knew that such people were either rich or respectable. He didn't dare to neglect them. Please wait for a moment, I'll go now. After the waiter left, Shang Junlin lowered his voice and asked, Did you also come up with these designs? He knew that Shinyu had a lot of strange ideas, from big ones that could shake the imperial court to small ones that could create new snacks. Now, there was this new shop that was full of novelty. It really brought him surprises all the time. I just made some small suggestions. I didn't expect them to make the finished products so quickly. Yu's small suggestions often make things extraordinary. Shang Junlin tapped his forehead. Water control method, cement method, ice making method. Which one of them wouldn't cause a huge sensation? While they were talking, the shop owner quickly walked over. The shop owner was a middle-aged man in his 30s. When he heard that a young master surnamed Yu had come to the shop, he hurried outside. Young master, do you want to talk inside? The shop owner saw that Shinyu was acting intimately with a tall man, and his footsteps were almost floating. He knew Shan Yu's identity, so the identity of the man who came with Shun Yu and acted intimately with Shan Yu was self-evident. Shun Yu turned to Shang Junlin. Shang Junlin looked back at him. If he wants to go, then go. Shin Yu was about to answer when a green-clothed waiter hurriedly ran over. Shopkeeper, it's not good. Those people are here again. What happened? It's nothing. Young masters, please come with me to the inner room for a while. How can it be nothing? The green-clothed waiter's face showed disgust. Those people just see that our business is better than theirs, so they often come to harass us. They don't even know how to reflect on themselves. Shut up. The shop owner sternly reprimanded. While they were talking, the noise came from afar. Oh, there are quite a lot of customers in the shop today. Boss, have you considered the suggestion I made last time? Chapter 101. The shopkeeper's face became ugly. He didn't want to disturb the nobles. He just wanted to get rid of them as soon as possible. He coldly said, I said, it's impossible. Look at you. You don't have anyone behind you. Why don't you merge with my shop? Then you won't have to worry about anyone finding trouble with you in the future, right? The speaker's tone was sloppy, like a cat teasing a mouse. You don't have to worry about my business. You are not welcome here. Please leave. The shopkeeper's attitude was firm. After a few words, the man had already walked in front of them. Xinyu also saw clearly what kind of person came to find trouble. He was about 20 years old. He was wearing a golden robe and a golden crown inlaid with various colored gems. The feeling he gave people could be described with one word: rich. His appearance was not bad. He was waving a golden fan. From inside to outside, the word dandy was written. The man swaggered in with a group of servants behind him. The old customers in the shop were accustomed to this scene. The new customer caused some disturbance, but it was quickly pacified. Who is this person? Xinyu asked. He didn't remember anything related to this person. He thought that this person was not an official. He is the young master of Minister Jin's family. Since the shop opened, he comes here every few days. At first, he just wanted to buy some brushes and ink. Later, he began to ask me to merge the shop with his shop. The shopkeeper smiled bitterly. This shop was newly opened. He was also the owner of a shop, but he encountered some bad things and had to sell the shop. He happened to meet Xin Yu's people and became Shan Yu's subordinate. After the shop changed its owner behind the scenes, Xin Yu ordered to change the business model. The originally deserted shop suddenly became popular. Even if it was in a remote location, there was an endless stream of customers every day. Later, with the introduction of patterned rice paper, its reputation spread and the business became better. At this time, the young master of the Jin family insisted on buying the shop. In the blink of an eye, the young master of the Jin family had already arrived in front of the four people. He closed his fan and pressed it against his chin. Then tell me, what do you want to agree to my request? Do you want me to let you manage the shops under my name? That shop of yours has always been losing money. What's the use of giving it to us shopkeepers? The green-robed servant was indignant. Isn't this your shopkeeper's miraculous hands? If I remember correctly, this shop has been losing money before, right? Jin Gongzi was not angry even after being rebuked. His expression was still the same as before. Xin Yu observed him for a moment and found that he was really not angry. He originally thought that this person was looking for trouble, but now it seemed that this was not the case. What exactly did this young Master Jin want to do? Don't look for me again. I won't agree. If he didn't feel that Jin Gongzi had no malice, the boss wouldn't have talked to him. Why? From time to time, the eyes of the surrounding guests swept over them. Xinyu saw that Jin Gongzi was unwilling to give up, so he said, "Let's talk somewhere else." Young Master Jin was reluctant. He wanted to ask, "Who are you? Why can you make the decision?" But seeing that the boss had no objection, he silently swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. The four of them went into the inner room. The boss glanced at Xinyu, and Xinyu nodded slightly at him. "I can't agree to your request, no matter how generous your conditions are, because this shop doesn't belong to me," the boss explained. Jin Gongzi was dumbfounded. "Haven't you always been the owner of this shop? You know about my past?" He didn't know anyone with a status like the Jin family before. "You haven't moved your shop, so of course I know that you used to be the owner of this shop. I also know that there were always people looking for trouble with you. You didn't sell the shop to that person, right? You might as well sell it to me." The boss had a headache because of his jumpy thoughts. "What are you thinking? Now this shop is young Master Yu's." Jin Gongzi followed the boss's line of sight and looked at Xinyu. Xinyu nodded slightly. "No wonder you are so respectful to them. It turns out that they are the new owners." Jin Gongzi muttered. "Now can you tell me what's going on?" Xinyu said in a low voice. The boss also wanted to know why Jin Gongzi was so diligent. Jin Gongzi was stared at by several people, so he didn't look away. "It's Zhou Dingsheng. I don't get along with him. When I saw him instructing his servants to make you unable to stay in this place, I didn't let him succeed. Since you now have a new owner, you won't be bullied by him anymore." These days, the Zhou family didn't come looking for trouble because you stopped them. No one knew who the real owner of this shop was except for him. At first, he was curious about why the Zhou family stopped. He didn't expect that someone was secretly helping him. Jin Gongzi swaggered into the shop every day with a group of servants. When the Zhou family saw it, they didn't dare to do anything. Although the Zhou family was a little rich, they couldn't be compared with the Jin family. The misunderstanding was cleared up, so Jin Gongzi left with his servants. The purchase of the shop didn't go through Shen Yu's hands, so he didn't know about it. Now that he knew, he couldn't completely ignore it. What's going on? Shen Yu's knuckles tapped on the wooden table. Before Gongzi's people found me, I was already at my wit's end. The Zhou family took a fancy to this place and wanted to take it by force. At that time, the shop's business was not good, and someone maliciously hindered it, so the old customers also ran away. After a period of renovation, the shop was closed for a period of time. When it was reopened, the Zhou family didn't come looking for it. He thought that Shen Yu's people warned the Zhou family behind their back. He was just a small boss, so he couldn't do anything to the Zhou family. But for any aristocratic family in Beijing, the Zhou family was nothing. Since you work for me, if there's anything you can't solve, just tell me directly. Shen Yu would naturally protect people who worked for him conscientiously. Shen Yu looked at the shop's account book and asked about the shop's situation and future plans. The boss of the bookstore knew what was going on, so his answers were basically satisfactory to Shen Yu. There were other shops to check, so Shen Yu didn't stay for long. How much does you know about the boss of this shop? In the carriage, Shang Junlin fed Shen Yu a peeled pine nut candy. Shen Yu was greedy and asked Shang Junlin to buy the pine nut candy when they passed by a small stall just now. Shang Junlin always agreed to Shen Yu's small requests, so he got off the carriage and bought 2 packets. The pine nut candy was very sweet. Shen Yu narrowed his eyes with satisfaction. At that time, I was in the palace, so I couldn't do many things myself, so I handed them over to my subordinates. At that time, my subordinates sent me a message saying that there was a shop that needed to be sold. All the requirements met my requirements, so I asked them to buy the shop. Later, I learned that the original boss of the shop had been doing this for generations, so I let him continue to manage it. The boss's surname is Yi, and he has lived in the capital for generations. He's kind and doesn't have any bad relationships with people. As for his relationship with the Zhou family, I'm not sure. Shen Yu couldn't know everything that happened to every one of his subordinates. This person gives me a familiar feeling. Shang Junlin frowned. Maybe it's my illusion? If your majesty is worried, then let the hidden dragon guards check it out. Check on the Zhou family too. Okay. Then, the 2 of them went to the jewelry shop. This shop was located in the busiest area in the capital. There was an endless stream of people coming and going. They didn't enter the shop, but went to the backyard from the side. Among all the shops, this shop had the most beautiful accounts. It even opened a branch not long ago. Shen Yu didn't expect a woman's purchasing ability to be so amazing. After receiving the news, the shopkeeper put down what he was doing and welcomed the 2 of them in. Young master, have some tea. This shop was left behind by Shen Yu's mother. The shopkeeper was also an old man by Shen Yu's side. In the past few years, the shop wasn't doing well, and the shopkeeper felt guilty. Later on, with the prescription given by Shen Yu, he developed a new product and it became one of the most profitable shops in the capital. Only then did the guilt in his heart disappear. He worked harder and harder. Shen Yu only gave him a few new products. The shopkeeper came up with different ways to make and sell them. Some were for the ladies of aristocratic families, and some were for ordinary ladies. The former was exquisite and expensive, while the latter was cheap and expensive. Both were very popular. Shen Yu took a sip of tea and listened to the shopkeeper talk about the results. There was a trace of a smile in his eyes. You've done well. The shopkeeper was flattered. You flatter me. If not for the prescription given by you, I wouldn't have been able to revive the shop. Not only was the business flourishing, but they also opened a new branch. There were partners who took the initiative to come to them. Young master, there is one more thing. Some time ago, a young master named Yin Zhang came to us and asked if we could talk about cooperation. The shopkeeper remembered something important. I can't make a decision on this matter. Does young master want to cooperate with him? What kind of person do you think he is? Is he worth cooperating with? Shen Yu put down his cup. Yin Zhang, the person who took the initiative to give money to the Ministry of Works to build roads, had also had a meal with them. He came to me several times. He has an extraordinary way of talking and acts appropriately. If young master wants to find someone to cooperate with, you can consider him. It seems that shopkeeper Su thinks highly of him. Shopkeeper Su had worked for Shenyu for so many years, but the number of times he praised someone like this was very few. I just think that the idea he put forward is very reasonable. Shopkeeper Su turned around and took out a book from the shelf. I organized this according to his ideas. Young master, you can take a look first. Shinyu took it and skimmed through it. He had to admit that this plan was very perfect. Everything that needed to be considered had been taken into account. Alin, take a look too. After Shenyu finished reading, he handed the book to Shang Junlin. Shang Junlin gently nodded after reading it. Shinyu knew that he could only take out more things in the future. If he wanted to cooperate, it would definitely be long-term. Before cooperating, he should at least have a certain understanding of the partner. I will consider the cooperation. If he comes to you again, tell him that I will talk to him personally. Shinyu paused for a moment and added, before that, you should organize Yin Zheng's information and give it to me? Yes. Shopkeeper Su was surprised. He didn't expect that Shenyu would come in person. He silently remembered this matter. In the blink of an eye, it was time for dinner. Are we going back to the palace or after dinner? Shang Junlin asked in the carriage. Let's go to the Yingxing Tower. Shenyu had a good impression of the Yingxing Tower. The carriage turned around and drove towards the Yingxing Tower. Your Majesty, you didn't seem very happy just now. Why? Shang Junlin wasn't very happy in the second half of the conversation with shopkeeper Su. If you want to cooperate, you can just let his subordinates do it. He doesn't need to do it personally. It turned out that it was because of this matter. Shinyu laughed out loud. What are you laughing at? Shang Junlin pinched Shan Yu's chin, his eyes deep. Your Majesty, don't you think that today we are particularly like a husband accompanying his wife to inspect a shop? Chapter 102. Shang Junlin's cold expression froze. Ha ha ha, Shinyu found it funny. She grabbed Shang Junlin's wrist and said, Your Majesty can come with me if you're worried. Or is it that your Majesty doesn't want me to see? I'll go with you. Without waiting for Shenyu to finish, Shang Junlin interrupted her and stroked the delicate skin on Shan Yu's chin. Since Yu has admitted our relationship as her husband, I should accompany my wife. Shenyu heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that he had dealt with the person. However, before he could finish his sigh of relief, the man leaned over. Since we're husband and wife, shouldn't Yu fulfill the duties of a husband and wife? Her whisper disappeared from her lips. The man's breath swept over and wrapped Shenyu in it before she could react. She felt a warm touch on her lips and her chin was clamped by a strong hand. She couldn't break free. Shenyu was kissed by the man in his arms without any resistance. The man's kiss was overbearing and powerful. It rushed forward with an indomitable momentum, vowing to conquer every space. Under the man's powerful attack, Shenyu was utterly defeated. The slight sound of water could be heard in the enclosed space. Their clothes rubbed against each other and made a rustling sound. The black clothes blended into the blue clothes and became one. Unknowingly, her chin was released. Shang Junlin held Shin Yu's soft waist with one hand and pressed the back of Shan Yu's head with the other. He held her tightly in his arms. When doing this, Shang Junlin was as domineering as ever. Shin Yu closed her eyes and focused all her senses on her lips. Her lips were sucked and her mouth was occupied. Under the storm, she could only drift along with the man's movements. The kiss was over. Shang Junlin still refused to let go of the person in his arms. His lips touched Shin Yu and touched her gently as if he was comforting her. Shin Yu's breathing was unstable. The corners of her eyes were dyed red, and her lips were as red as if she had applied rouge, glistening with tears. Shang Junlin's eyes darkened. He wanted to kiss her again, but he only kissed Shin Yu's hand. She bit Shin Yu's palm with dissatisfaction. You? If you continue to kiss me, I won't be able to see anyone later. Shin Yu's voice was muffled. Let's go straight back to the palace. Shin Yu shook his head. His attitude was firm. What a joke. If he went back like this, wouldn't he be like a lamb in a tiger's den? Wouldn't he be troubled by Shang Junlin for the rest of the night? Shang Junlin couldn't resist him, so he could only give up the idea of continuing. He kissed Shin Yu's face twice before releasing him. In the following time, Xinyu tidied up his clothes. When he was almost recovered, they arrived at Yingxing Tower. At this time, other than her lips being a little red, Xinyu's face didn't have any abnormalities. The two walked into Yingxing Tower. The waiter warmly welcomed them. "Two guests, please come in. Would you like to sit in the hall or in a private room?" "Private room," Shang Junlin said. "Okay, please follow me." Yingxing Tower was very lively. The hall was full of people. It was different from the simple and elegant decorations during the imperial examinations. The whole Yingxing Tower was brightly lit and magnificent. The difference was huge. It didn't seem like the same restaurant at all. When they went up to the second floor, they could occasionally hear the sound of musical instruments from other private rooms. "Yingxing Tower does other business?" Xinyu stopped. "Are you talking about the sound of musical instruments? They are not from our tower. Some guests will bring one or two girls to add to the fun." Xinyu faintly said, "Yes," and changed the topic. "You seem to be very different from before." "You mean during the imperial examinations? Our boss specially ordered us to open this time every 3 years for those who go to the capital to study for the imperial examinations. The rest of the time, we operate as usual." "Your boss is a wonderful person." The waiter led the two of them to a private room. Xinyu ordered the dishes with ease. "Do you have any new snacks recently?" "What a coincidence. We happen to have some in our tower recently." The waiter introduced them nonstop. Xinyu chose a few with pleasant names. Sure enough, the customers of this restaurant are usually high officials and nobles. After the waiter left, Xinyu sighed. The price of each dish was several times more expensive than the last time they came. If it's like before, this restaurant can't continue to operate. Do you want to drink water?" Xinyu nodded. He happened to be thirsty. Shang Junlin took the teapot on the table and poured a cup of tea for the two of them. They didn't have to wait long. Soon, the dishes were served one by one. The last one was Xunyu's dessert. The fruit was cut into small pieces and mixed with milk evenly. There were finger-sized ice cubes inside. It was similar to what Xinyu ate in Yuzhong Palace. Xinyu stirred it with a spoon. "This is? Customer, you have good taste. This is a recipe from the palace. It's best to eat it in summer. This is also the best-selling dessert in our tower." Xinyu scooped a spoonful and put it into his mouth. He didn't know how the milk got rid of the fishy taste, leaving only the sweetness. The fruit was fresh and juicy. With the cold texture, eating a bowl of it in the hot summer was indeed a pleasure. After Xinyu tasted it, he looked at the other bowl. There were also ice cubes in the other bowl, but the fruit was cut into smaller pieces. Instead of milk, there was a transparent liquid like water in the other bowl. The waiter followed Xunyu's gaze and introduced, "There's fruit wine in this bowl. Don't worry, it's not intoxicating. Children can also eat it." Speaking of which, we have to thank the imperial court for selling ice at such a low price. Ordinary people can't afford it, let alone make these desserts. The ice sold by the imperial court was divided into 2 categories. One was ordinary ice used to cool people down, so the price was lower. The other was edible ice, so the price was higher. However, no matter how high the price was, ordinary people could still afford it. It was not like the previous price, which was so expensive that it made people feel intimidated. Shang Junlin and Xunyu didn't like to be served. After all the dishes were served, they sent the waiter away. Yingxing Tower's dishes were delicious. The tempting aroma greeted them. However, Xinyu didn't pay much attention to these dishes. Instead, his eyes fell on a small bowl. It was the fruit wine ice brew that the waiter had just introduced. Xinyu had been craving for wine for a long time. However, Shang Junlin was strict and didn't let him drink at all. Now that he finally had a chance, Xinyu couldn't wait to put the small bowl in front of him. "I'll just have a taste." Xinyu put the spoon into his mouth. He was slightly disappointed. There was only a very light taste of wine, which was completely different from what Xunyu had imagined. After casually eating 2 mouthfuls, Xunyu lost interest. He preferred the bowl with milk, which was sweeter. Shang Junlin found it funny. He took the half bowl that Xinyu hadn't finished and ate it. "Your Majesty, what do you think?" Xinyu supported his chin and looked at Shang Junlin. "Is the taste of wine slightly lighter?" Yu wants to drink wine. Shang Junlin and Shin Yu ate and lived together. Because Shin Yu's body couldn't drink wine, he hadn't drunk wine for a long time. Shin Yu nodded. The tip of his tongue slid over his lower lip and licked the milk stained on it. Some images flashed through his mind. Shang Junlin's eyes were dark. Before Shun Yu could react, he had pulled him into his arms and kissed him deeply. Shang Junlin's kiss had always been far from gentle. It was like a fierce beast patrolling its territory. Every move of his carried a strong force that couldn't be disobeyed. This kiss was especially heavy. It was as if he wanted to mark every part of Shun Yu's body. He didn't let go of any part of Shun Yu's body. The kiss was very deep. Shin Yu's tongue was numb. His fingers weakly grasped the clothes on Shang Junlin's shoulders. After a long time, Shang Junlin let go of Shin Yu. His lips lingered on Shan Yu's face. Shin Yu leaned on Shang Junlin's arm. It took a while for him to recover. "What's wrong, Your Majesty?" Shin Yu asked, panting. Shang Junlin stroked Shan Yu's lips with his fingers and gently pressed. He didn't answer the question. Yu's lips are so soft. Shin Yu? Shang Junlin didn't say anything else. He tidied up Shin Yu's clothes. "It's late. Let's go back to the palace." It was already dark outside. There was a curfew in Dahuan. After a while, they wouldn't be able to stay on the streets. Official Fong kept in touch with the imperial court every day. After Yun County, they would reach the border of Subei. The situation was getting worse. In order to ensure that they could reach Subei as soon as possible, official Fong chose the shortest route. There was an army accompanying them on the way, so they didn't have to worry about bandits. Even so, they were still ambushed near Subei. There weren't many casualties, but a batch of disaster relief supplies was stolen. The atmosphere in the main hall was oppressive. Shang Junlin sat on the dragon throne and looked down coldly. "Ministers, what do you think about this matter?" "I think that this matter must be investigated thoroughly." The Prime Minister was the first to stand up. "I second that." With the first to stand up, the other ministers also stood up one after another. "This matter will be handed over to the Prime Minister to handle." When they returned to Yuzhong Palace, Shang Junlin immediately hugged Shin Yu. Shin Yu felt that the man was in a bad mood. He patted him on the back and asked, "What's wrong, Your Majesty?" Fang Jun and the others encountered bandits. Shin Yu paused. Where did the bandits come from? How dare they steal disaster relief supplies from the imperial court? They were attacked in Yun County. I've already asked the Prime Minister to investigate. I'm afraid that this matter isn't as simple as it seems. Are official Fong and the others all right? I secretly sent some people to accompany them. If it weren't for these people, the loss wouldn't be so small. Shang Junlin's eyes were cold. These people obviously know the imperial court's arrangements very well. However, the imperial court's arrangements for disaster relief are public. Many people know about it. It's hard to determine who did it behind the scenes. Shin Yu touched Shang Junlin's neck. Your Majesty, have some water first. You, feed me. Shang Junlin rubbed Shin Yu's face. Your Majesty, let go of me first. Shang Junlin let go. Shin Yu walked to the table and poured a cup of tea. Shang Junlin didn't take it and just looked at him. Shin Yu had no choice but to raise his arm and feed the tea to the man's mouth. After drinking the tea in this position, Shang Junlin took the cup from Shin Yu's hand and put it aside. He hugged Shin Yu again and said in a daze, I don't understand. Those are disaster relief supplies. Millions of people in Subei are waiting for them to save their lives. Why did they steal them? Your Majesty, you don't need to understand what these people are thinking. Just find out who did it and deal with them directly. There's no need to waste your breath. Yu is right. They only need to know that they are destined to pay for what they have done. We're missing a batch of supplies. Will the supplies that official Fong and the others brought be enough? Shin Yu thought of the most important problem. They can last for a while, but they must make up for the shortage as soon as possible. The Minister of Revenue is already gathering supplies. Shang Junlin thought of something and smiled. The Minister of Revenue was the one who reacted the most when the news came back. He was so angry that he directly scolded the robbers in court. It scared the ministers. They probably didn't expect that the Minister of Revenue who has always been gentle and polite, would have such a side. Xinyu couldn't help but laugh when he imagined the scene. Chapter 103. Yun County. The people with the remaining supplies temporarily stayed in place to rest. Lord Fong took a pot of water and walked to the other side. The closer he got to Subei, the more he could feel the heat and drought. Yun County was close to Subei, but it was also affected by the drought. The ground cracked, the flowers and plants on the roadside drooped their heads listlessly, and even the wind blowing in his face was hot. Not far from the relief team, a group of men in tight-fitting uniforms hid in the dark. Everyone wore a black mask with strange patterns on their faces, which tightly covered the upper half of their faces. It was because of the sudden appearance of these people that they did not suffer heavy losses. Before the incident, even Fong Jun did not know that there was such a team following them. Lord Fong expected that this trip would not be smooth sailing, but he did not expect those people to be so bold. The people they sent just happened to be able to suppress them. Lord Fong did not dare to imagine what would happen to them if Her Majesty did not have a backup plan. As he walked, Lord Fong recalled what happened at that time. It happened in the middle of the night. Except for the people on night watch, everyone else was fast asleep. Lord Fong was awakened by the sound of weapons clashing. His subordinates heard the sound and rushed over to protect him. Those people's purpose was clear. They were here for the relief supplies, so they did not use fire. In the sound of fighting, they gradually lost and fell into a disadvantageous position. Seeing that another cart of supplies was stolen, Lord Fong took his subordinate's sword and desperately slashed at the thieves. He hit the target, but he was also exposed to the enemy. A cold light flashed behind him, but it was too late to dodge. Fong Jun was not afraid of death. He only hated that he could not complete Her Majesty's task and send the relief supplies safely to Subei. The sharp sword approached. At the last moment, with a clatter, the long sword was flicked away and fell to the ground with a bang. Then, there was the sound of a sharp weapon stabbing into a wound. Lord Fong wiped the blood splashed on his face. Only then did he realize that a group of people in black had filled the gap between the soldiers and fought with the enemy. In the dark night, these people in black were like ghosts, wandering the battlefield and taking away the enemy's life. The situation was reversed in an instant. Everyone, please drink some water. Master Fong walked to the front of the group, but didn't approach them rashly. After defeating the bandits, these people stayed behind to protect them in the dark. Later on, they were attacked a few more times. With these people around, they didn't suffer any losses. Instead, it was the other party who lost many people here. Lord Fong could faintly smell the scent of blood. Without any explanation, he handed the water bottle to the leader. Are you injured? I've brought some emergency medicine. Wait for me. I'll get it for you. No need. The voice of the men in black was as cold as the masks on their faces. This is the medicine that I specifically requested from Imperial Physician Gu of the Imperial Hospital before I came here. You know Imperial Physician Gu, right? He's an imperial physician who specializes in nurturing the noble lord's body. His medical skills are very brilliant. I thought that this trip would not be peaceful, so I asked for some emergency medicine. See, it just so happens that I can use it. Lord Fong could sense that the young man in front of him wasn't too old. Furthermore, the other party had saved his life, so he had a good impression of him. Hearing the name, the man in black swallowed his words of refusal. I know that you're protecting us because you're following orders, but you should also protect yourselves. If you're injured, how are you going to protect us? The same goes for the people you brought with you. If you need anything, just say it. Lord Fong couldn't help but ramble. The young man chuckled. Do the people in the imperial court know that Lord Fong is so meticulous? I don't need them to know what to do. Lord Fong waved his hand. I'll go get the medicine for you. Wait a moment. Lord Fong came back with the medicine. There were several bottles of medicine of different sizes. At a glance, one could tell that it was Imperial Physician Gu's style. Seeing the young man take the medicine and stuff it into his clothes, Lord Fong smiled with satisfaction. You can't ignore your health. Remember to apply the medicine properly. Thank you for the medicine, Lord Fong. The man in black clasped his hands. No need. If anyone should thank someone, I should be the one thanking you for saving my life. Lord Fong stopped him. Then, his expression turned serious. I'm afraid that the next part of the journey won't be easy. I'll have to trouble you. After Lord Fong finished speaking, he went back. He was the main person in charge of the disaster relief this time. There were still many things to do. After resting and reorganizing, Lord Fong took people to count the supplies. He wrote down the losses and surplus in a memorial and sent it back to the imperial court. Then, he took people to continue north. Their mission had just begun. After receiving the memorial from Subei, Shang Junlin immediately summoned the Prime Minister and the Minister of Revenue to discuss the next step of the plan. Subei involved a lot of people and was a solid barrier for Dahuan in the north. No matter what, nothing could happen to it. Imperial Physician Gu seems to have something on his mind. Did something happen? After taking his pulse, Xinyu saw that Imperial Physician Gu was distracted and asked, "It's this subject's younger brother. He said that he had to go out for a few days. It's been more than 10 days, and there's been no news from him." Imperial Physician Gu didn't have any friends who could talk about these things. He was really worried, so Xinyu couldn't help but ask, "Gu Huai?" "Yes, Xiao Huai has never been separated from me for so long in his life. I don't know where he went or if he's in danger." Imperial Physician Gu frowned slightly. "Don't worry, Imperial Physician Gu. Gu Huai will be fine. Thank you for your comfort." At night, Xinyu nestled in Shang Junlin's arms and asked about Gu Huai. "Your Majesty, do you know where Gu Huai went?" "You? Why are you suddenly asking about him?" Shang Junlin pinched Shen Yu's face. "Who said something to you?" "Shen Yu. It's Imperial Physician Gu. He was worried about his younger brother and said a few words to me." Shang Junlin. "You? Do you still remember that I sent people to secretly follow Fong Jun?" Shen Yu. "Your Majesty is saying that the person who secretly followed Lord Fong to Subei was Gu Huai?" Shang Junlin nodded. "Machim, Shen Yu. Why did your Majesty think of sending him?" Shang Junlin. "First, no one in the court knows about Gu Huai. Sending him is convenient to avoid people's eyes and ears. Second, I see that he is a talented general and want to give him an opportunity to perform meritorious service. The Dahuan Kingdom's way of becoming an official was fixed, and only the military officials had room to maneuver. But now that the Dahuan Kingdom was peaceful and there was no war, this path had been blocked. If one wanted to become an official, they could only obediently follow the rules. I can't always personally lead the troops. Dahuan should also have a group of qualified military officials." Shang Junlin lifted a strand of Shan Yu's hair and twirled it between his fingers. After the disaster of the previous emperor, Dahuan's interior could be said to be devastated. The civil officials were still fine, but it was not an exaggeration to say that there was no successor for the military officials. When the previous emperor was on the throne, the capable military officials were all demoted or even killed for various reasons. The ones who replaced them were all idiots. If not for this, Dahuan would not have lost so many battles and lost so much of its territory. "Does your Majesty want to rehabilitate those generals?" Shen Yu turned over and lay on Shang Junlin's body. "Those generals are not the only ones who need to be rehabilitated. Many ministers who wholeheartedly served the country were also sacrificed. I want to wash away the stain on their bodies." While speaking, Shang Junlin stared into Shen Yu's eyes. Shen Yu couldn't help but blink. She lowered her head and rubbed Shen Yu's cheek. "Your Majesty can definitely do it." Shang Junlin reached out and wrapped his arms around Shen Yu's waist. His eyes were as black as ink. If it was a Yu's wish to be a wise emperor, he was willing to be the most qualified emperor in a Yu's mind, as long as a Yu was willing to stay by his side forever. The disaster relief matters were arranged in an orderly manner. As for the bandits, Shang Junlin also handed them over to a general in the north. They were determined to catch them. However, they still encountered a problem in the disaster relief matter. A part of the supplies were stolen. Although the imperial court kept some as backup, it was not enough. Subei was too big, including the entire Subei army. The consumption was astonishing. It was unknown when the drought would end. If it dragged on for too long, the imperial court could not afford it. After the Minister of Revenue peeled off the second batch of supplies, he calculated the remaining quantity and had to come to Shang Junlin with a bitter face. At this time, Shang Junlin was discussing the alcohol with Shunyu in Yuzhong Palace. After more than a month of trial and error, Shunyu finally succeeded in producing the first bottle of medical alcohol. She sent the alcohol to Yuzhong Palace as soon as possible. Eunuch Meng walked in from outside. "Your Majesty, the Minister of Revenue requests an audience. It's probably about the disaster relief supplies. Your Majesty, can I come with you?" Shunyu had some thoughts about this matter. "Then you will accompany me to the imperial study." Therefore, when the Minister of Revenue arrived at the imperial study, he saw Shunyu and Shang Junlin. "Your Majesty, Your Majesty." Although he did not understand why Your Majesty was here, the Minister of Revenue still bowed respectfully. "Your Majesty, I have an important matter to report." "Yes, Your Majesty." "Your Majesty, with all due respect, the National Treasury is not enough to support the disaster in Subei for a long time. If there is no other way, it can only last for a month at most. However, Your Majesty also knows that after the drought, there are often locusts, plagues, and other situations. I'm afraid that in a month, there was another very serious problem. After autumn, before winter, the nomads in the north would go south and rob everything they could. If Subei was still affected by the disaster at that time, Dahuan would be in danger. Do you have a plan?" Shang Junlin certainly knew the seriousness of the problem. "I have thought of two ways. One is to levy more taxes, and the other is to collect more taxes. These two methods can solve the urgent problem," the Minister of Revenue said in a deep voice. Shang Junlin frowned. The taxes in Dahuan were all collected at the end of the year. If they were collected now, many people would not be able to pay. Moreover, these two methods would take a certain amount of time to complete. From the local area to the capital and then to Subei, it would take too much time. It would also consume a lot of manpower and material resources. I also know that this method is not appropriate, but there was no other way for the time being. "Your Majesty, I have an idea." Instead of levying more taxes and collecting more taxes, it will be voluntary donations. For the people, they will donate as much as they can. We can't affect their normal lives for the disaster relief. For the rich aristocrats or members of the imperial clan, we can give them a certain amount of rewards based on the amount they donate. This method focuses on the rewards. The rich all have a competitive mentality. Wouldn't it be better to let them donate voluntarily rather than forcibly collecting? The Minister of Revenue was a smart person. He could immediately figure out the difference between the two methods. If they were to change to voluntary donations, there would be no complaints. It would also give the donors a sense of honor. He cupped his hands and saluted Shunyu. "Your Majesty is a great talent. Darren doesn't need to be so polite. The specific operation still needs Darren to take care of it. There are also the various vassals. Subei is in trouble. As relatives of the imperial clan, they should contribute to the country." After listening to Shunyu's words, the Minister of Revenue couldn't help but look at him again. He cupped his hands and said, "I will do my best." "Sir, please clear our doubts. There are many talented people around His Majesty. You will know in the future." The Minister of Revenue smiled. "Sir, why are you still keeping us in suspense at this time?" With the boulder in his heart removed, the atmosphere instantly relaxed. "All right, let's discuss what to do first." His Majesty is still waiting for an answer. Everyone started a heated discussion. Outside the palace, shopkeeper Su sent a message saying that Yin Zhang had come looking for him again. He followed Xunyu's instructions and told the other party that Yin Zhang wanted to meet with Xunyu. When Xunyu read the letter, he did not avoid Shang Junlin. Shang Junlin peeled a grape and put it in Shan Yu's mouth. "When does you plan to meet him? Does His Majesty have time to go out of the palace recently?" Xunyu bit the grape in his mouth. The slightly sour grape juice filled his mouth. Xunyu frowned and swallowed the grape. Shang Junlin noticed his expression. "What's wrong? The grape is sour?" A little. In fact, it was not bad. It was sweet on the whole, but there was a trace of sourness. Shin Yu did not like to eat sour things. Then don't eat it. Ming Chong, don't serve this kind of grape in the future. Shang Junlin put down the grape in his hand and picked up a handkerchief to wipe his hands. Eunuch Ming hurriedly removed the grapes from the table. Shin Yu drank a few mouthfuls of water to relieve the sourness in his mouth. If His Majesty does not have time, I will go out of the palace myself. Shang Junlin was very busy recently. He had to personally oversee the matters of the imperial court, the matters of Subei, and the disaster relief. Shin Yu woke up several times, but Shang Junlin was still busy. I will go with you. No matter how busy he was, Shang Junlin would not let Shin Yu meet Yin Zheng alone. He did not forget the experience in Yin Zheng's eyes when they first met. Shin Yu wrote a reply to shopkeeper Su and arranged the meeting to be in the afternoon 3 days later. After the finished medical alcohol was made, Shang Junlin gave a part of it to the Imperial Institute of Medicine to let them test the effect. A few days later, the Imperial Institute of Medicine received some results. When Imperial Physician Gu came to take Shun Yu's pulse, he mentioned this matter. The medical alcohol that His Majesty gave to the Imperial Institute of Medicine can indeed reduce wound infections. The Imperial Institute of Medicine found some small animals and compared the wounds with and without alcohol. The former was obviously not infected and healed faster. Speaking of this, Imperial Physician Gu was very excited. He had studied medicine for many years and knew how serious the consequences of an infected wound could be. Many people died not because of the wound itself, but because of the infection of the wound. If the wound infection could be reduced, patients with large wounds would be more likely to be cured in the future. At the same time, the booklet from the Imperial Institute of Medicine was handed to Shang Junlin's desk. The booklet not only reported the results of this period, but also applied for a new batch of alcohol and permission to use it on wounded patients. After all, using small animals to test medicine was not the same as testing medicine on humans. What's more, the alcohol was sent to the Imperial Institute of Medicine by Shang Junlin's people. Any changes had to be reported to him. If it can really be used on humans, the soldiers at the border will be able to reduce a lot of unnecessary casualties. In Yuzhong Palace, Shang Junlin and Shan Yu talked about this matter with a slightly excited tone. Shang Junlin had entered the army when he was young, so he had a deep understanding of the living conditions of the soldiers at the border. He had experienced too many deaths and knew that many soldiers did not die on the battlefield, but died because their wounds were not properly treated in time. After Shang Junlin ascended the throne, he assigned military doctors to all the troops. However, the worsening of the wounds caused by the worsening of the infection caused by the wounds, and the military doctors were helpless. Shin Yu made some more and sent it to Yuzhong Palace yesterday. Your Majesty can give it to the Imperial Institute of Medicine. If it has the same effect on humans, we can start preparing to popularize alcohol in the army. Yu is right. If it can really reduce the casualties of the soldiers, Shin Yu can be considered to have made a great contribution. After the Imperial Institute of Medicine obtained the alcohol, Shang Junlin specially ordered them to be allowed to bring the alcohol into the imperial prison. The prisoners in the imperial prison were all criminals who had committed heinous crimes and were awaiting punishment. Among them, there were many who had been tortured. It was a good opportunity to test the effects of the alcohol. Led by Imperial Physician Gu, several imperial physicians entered the imperial prison with medicine boxes. Later, a terrifying legend began to spread in the imperial prison. It was said that the imperial prison set up a new type of punishment. The torturer wore white clothes and did something to the prisoners. The prisoners' heart-wrenching screams could be heard from afar. During that time, the prisoners in the imperial prison were especially obedient. They would answer whatever questions were asked. The efficiency of handling cases was more than doubled. Isn't Imperial Physician Gu killing 2 birds with 1 stone? Shin Yu couldn't help but laugh after reading the booklet. The people from the Supreme Court also asked if they could directly arrange for a few imperial physicians to be stationed in the imperial prison. They said that the methods of the imperial physicians were much better than torture to deal with some difficult prisoners. Shang Junlin also didn't expect such an unexpected development. Imperial physician Gu and the others probably didn't expect that they would become a nightmare for the prisoners in the Imperial prison. Needless to say, the Chancellor of the Supreme Court really did visit the Imperial Institute of Medicine. This made Imperial physician Gu and the others speechless. They studied medicine to save the dying and heal the injured, not to torture people. When alcohol came into contact with the wounds, it would indeed cause great irritation. Imperial physician Gu and the others had tried to reduce this irritation, but to no avail. The prisoners had many wounds on their bodies. If they applied alcohol on a large area, it would definitely be unbearable for them. Official Fong and the others finally arrived in Subei. The black-clothed men who were secretly protecting them returned to their hiding places. The ones who came to greet them were Sun Zhao and two other officials from Subei, who had arrived earlier. After exchanging some pleasantries, they moved into the Subei government's residence. The other officials all breathed a sigh of relief. Only Official Fong knew more than the others and didn't dare to let down his guard. When the supplies arrived, the officials from Subei and the officials from the Imperial Court began to arrange the disaster relief. Official Fong was led around by several enthusiastic officials from Subei to stroll around the area. Just by looking at this place, one wouldn't think that the disaster was serious. The road was very clean, and there weren't any seriously affected victims on the side of the road. Occasionally, they would see a few people walking by, but they were all in a hurry and didn't dare to look at them. Official Fong secretly remembered these abnormalities in his heart. Let's go back. Won't Official Fong continue to look around? It was impossible to see anything even if he continued to look. Official Fong became suspicious, but he didn't show it on his face. This official is tired. I'll go back and rest first. The two officials who accompanied him looked at each other. One of them, who had a goatee, said, Official Fong has traveled a long way to Subei. It's time for you to take a good rest. Rest assured, Official Fong, we will arrange the disaster relief. After returning, Official Fong wrote two memorials. One was to be sent to the capital from Subei, and the other was to be handed directly to the black-clothed men who were secretly following him. This unusual memorials wouldn't pass through the hands of any officials and would be sent directly to Shang Junlin. Shang Junlin freed up an afternoon to accompany Xinyu to the palace to meet Yin Zheng. The agreed meeting place was still in Xing Tower. The waiter led the two to a private room. Two guests, this is the place. Xinyu nodded to the waiter and walked into the private room with Shang Junlin. A man in a dark purple robe stood by the window with his back to them. When he heard the sound, he turned his head and saw Xinyu and Shang Junlin. His eyes flashed with astonishment. It's actually young Master Lin and young Master Yu. Quickly, please take a seat. Yin Zheng quickly restrained the emotions in his eyes and greeted them warmly. I also didn't expect such a coincidence. Xinyu and Shang Junlin sat down. Yin Zheng poured tea for the two. When I first met you, I felt that you two were very close. I didn't expect that we would have such a fate. Please. Xinyu picked up the tea and took a sip. I heard from shopkeeper Su that young Master Yin wants to cooperate with us. How does young Master Yin want to cooperate with us? Since the two of you came to see me personally, I won't keep you in suspense. I'm not talented, but I have several business routes. I wonder if the two of you are willing to sell these new products from the capital to other places? Yin Zheng vaguely guessed the identity of the two people and subconsciously looked at Shang Junlin. No need to look at me. Everything in our family is decided by Madam. Chapter 105. Xin Yu's hand that was holding the teacup paused. He suddenly realized that it was just as Shang Junlin said. Since he entered the palace, everything he did was not restricted. Even when it came to matters related to the imperial court, as long as he mentioned them, Shang Junlin would implement them. A strange feeling welled up in his heart. It was sour and hot. Xinyu used the action of drinking tea to cover the strange expression on his face for a moment. I didn't think it through. I punished myself by drinking a cup as an apology. Yin Zheng's face flashed with a trace of unnaturalness. He picked up the wine jug, poured himself a full jug of wine, and drank it all in one gulp. Yin Zheng was stuck. He really couldn't call the two words madam in front of the elegant young man. You. Shang Junlin picked up a piece of fish for Shun Yu with his chopsticks. You can call him young master Yu. Young master Yu. Yin Zhang had always been generous when it came to banquets. This time, he ordered all the famous dishes of Yingxing Tower. The cost of a table was not small. Yin Zhang didn't immediately talk about business. Xin Yu was also not in a hurry. When both sides were almost done eating, they talked about cooperation. Xin Yu had the intention to cooperate. Otherwise, he wouldn't have personally come to see Yin Zhang. He just had shopkeeper Su send him away. His identity meant that there were many things he couldn't personally take care of. If there was a reliable partner, it would be much more convenient. Where does young master Yin want to sell these things? Xin Yu put down his chopsticks and wiped his mouth. To be honest, I want to sell these things outside the pass at a high price. Yin Zhang directly said his plan. Outside the pass? Xin Yu raised his eyebrows. Does young master Yin have a trade route to outside the pass? Because of the loss of a large area of land during the reign of the late emperor, Da Huan didn't open the trade route to outside the pass. Of course, there was no explicit ban on merchants doing business outside the pass. As the relationship between Da Huan and other countries stabilized, there were gradually developed merchants who specialized in traveling inside and outside Da Huan. They would sell Da Huan's goods outside the pass at a high price, then bring back goods from outside the pass and sell them at a good price. However, the risk was very high. After all, without the protection of the government, the slightest carelessness could allow robbers to rob them. The loss of property was small, but in serious cases, they could even lose their lives. I have some connections. Yin Zheng smiled. Compared to Da Huan, I prefer to earn money from people outside the border. Yin Zheng was obviously prepared in advance. Their conversation was organized and clear. Xin Yu also expressed some of his own ideas. Shang Junlin also joined in the discussion. The final plan was more perfect than the initial one. The smile in Shun Yu's eyes deepened. This was the advantage of cooperating with a smart person. There was no need to explain too much. Just point out a point, and the other party would understand what it meant. It's not convenient for me to appear often. Shopkeeper Su will discuss the details of the cooperation with you. If you have any other questions, you can look for Shopkeeper Su directly. Shopkeeper Su is in charge of the trading of these items. Xin Yu didn't want to go out of the palace often because of this kind of thing. Compared to doing it personally, he preferred to let his subordinates do it. Okay, I'll talk to Shopkeeper Su about the details. In addition to the items suitable for women, I have some other goods that are suitable to be sold outside the border. If there is a chance, I look forward to continuing our cooperation in the future. I also hope to cooperate with Gongziyu for a long time. Oh right, has Gongziyu heard about the donation order that the Imperial Court is planning to release? The official version hadn't been released yet. The Ministry of Revenue was still discussing the specific reward measures. However, some people who were close to the officials of the Imperial Court had already received the news in advance. For example, Yin Zhang, who had formed a relationship with the Ministry of Works because of road repairs. After receiving the news from the officials he was close to, Yin Zhang had been preparing for this matter. He wasn't a short-sighted person. Of course, he knew how beneficial this matter was for merchants. This was directly receiving the approval of the Imperial Court. It was more useful than having a good relationship with any local official. For them, it was only a little money. Bribing anyone was the same. If they could establish a relationship with the Imperial Court and gain a good reputation, why not? You're talking about the donation to Subei? Xin Yu didn't expect the Ministry of Revenue to act so quickly. The news had already been leaked. Yes, I don't know who came up with this idea. It's too beneficial for us merchants. The bosses I know, and I have all decided to do our best. Every little bit counts. Yin Zhang casually mentioned it. The local aristocratic families will certainly be willing to contribute. Have the two of you heard that there are several families in Jiangbei that have stockpiled large amounts of grain and are planning to sell it to Subei? Xin Yu didn't know about this, but he remembered that in his previous life, several local aristocratic families had suddenly risen at this time. Later, they had provided a lot of convenience to the king of Yu. Your Majesty, why do you think Yin Zheng told us about the local aristocratic families? Shun Yu asked after returning to Yuzhong Palace. He should have deliberately revealed it to us. If I'm not wrong, the Ministry of Revenue will soon receive this news. The Minister of Revenue got the news from the Minister of Works. After the Minister of Works stopped asking for money from the Ministry of Revenue, the relationship between the two eased up. They were no longer as incompatible as before. They're good. At this time, they're still thinking about making a lot of money. The Minister of Revenue was angry. They didn't send all the grain to Subei because they were afraid something like this would happen. If the grain fell into the hands of the aristocratic families, these people would only raise the price in order to make money. If the common people couldn't afford the grain, there would be a big problem sooner or later. Don't be angry. Didn't we know about it in advance? When the time comes, we'll think of a way to get them to donate a batch of grain. The Minister of Works comforted. I have to think of a way to squeeze more grain out of them. They actually want to take advantage of the drought in Subei to make money without conscience. After the Minister of Revenue returned, he immediately called people from the Ministry of Revenue to talk about this matter. In fact, they all knew that because of the late emperor, there were many internal problems in Dahuan. Compared to the capital, there were more problems in the local areas. The aristocratic families were growing stronger day by day, and the vassal kings had too much control over the local areas. These were all problems that needed to be solved. The next day, Shang Junlin received a booklet from the Minister of Revenue regarding the local donation plan. After reading it, even though he knew that the Minister of Revenue wouldn't let go of this opportunity, he didn't expect him to be so ruthless. What's going on? Xinyu walked over and took the booklet from Shang Junlin's hands. What's written here? It's from the Minister of Revenue. Shang Junlin's eyes revealed a trace of a smile. It seems that he's furious. The booklet wrote what he heard from the Minister of Works. He deeply felt that these aristocratic families had a heart for the country and the people, and intended to help them fulfill their wishes. After reading it, Shun Yu was amused. If those aristocratic families knew that their intentions were misinterpreted by the Minister of Revenue like this, their expressions would probably be very good. These people didn't care about what would happen in Subei at all. They just wanted to take this opportunity to make a big profit. Shang Junlin later sent people to investigate. The aristocratic families in the capital knew how to restrain themselves. Many of the aristocratic families in the capital had already begun to wantonly purchase grain. However, the price they offered was slightly higher than the market price. The people happily sold the surplus grain at home. If they didn't discover it in time, when the national treasury was empty, these aristocratic families would have enough grain in their hands. Putting aside everything else, they also felt that this method was the most beneficial for Dahuan. They were already in the cabinet, so the first thing they had to ensure was Dahuan's stability. After the minister's discussion, the method proposed by the Minister of Revenue was further improved. After it was finally confirmed that there were no mistakes, it could be implemented. The people in the capital who had connections heard the news and began to make preparations. Shang Junlin came back from court and didn't find Xin Yu in the room. Where is Guijun? Greetings, Your Majesty. The palace servant who was called hurriedly saluted. Guijun is in the small theater over there. Shang Junlin went to the small theater. The small theater was north of Yuzhong Palace. Xin Yu rarely went there. Some time ago, he had discussed with Shang Junlin to redecorate it. Before he walked in, he heard the sound of opera from inside. When did you like to listen to opera? Shang Junlin walked into the small theater and happened to see Xin Yu lowering his head and saying something to a person in a pink costume. Before he could be jealous, he saw Xin Yu waving at him. Your Majesty, come quickly. Let's see how this part can be changed. What are you doing? Shang Junlin didn't know what was going on and walked over. I'm making up a play for the people in the capital. Before the imperial court issues an order, let them understand the meaning of what they are doing. Chapter 106. This was what Shun Yu had thought of recently. The disaster relief method that the imperial court was about to announce was not only in Dahuan, but also in the previous dynasties. Unlike the ministers in the imperial court who understood this method after a dispute, the people of Dahuan didn't understand this method. If someone had evil intentions at this time, the people who didn't know the inside story would easily fall into the trap. Yu intends to use opera to let the people understand? Shang Junlin picked up the script in Shan Yu's hand and asked, "Yes, I originally wanted to let some small officials explain it to the people. Later on, I thought that oral explanations might not be enough to reach the people's hearts. I have to find another method. It's best to mobilize the people's discussion and thinking." The people of Dahuan loved to listen to opera. Shen Yu wanted to weave this method into the opera and then let the opera troupe sing it for the people. Shang Junlin roughly flipped through the script. Right now, it was only a rough outline of the story. He was very familiar with the handwriting on the script. It was Shun Yu's. Yu is very thoughtful. After Shang Junlin finished reading the story, he felt that this story was just right. The disaster relief was linked throughout the entire story. Everything that happened in the opera revolved around it. What's more, Shinyu also included the possibility that someone might maliciously misinterpret the imperial court's meaning. He was very thoughtful. Even if someone wanted to use this to cause trouble, their first reaction would be that it was a bad person in the opera. Shinyu was almost done with his work. It just so happened that it was time to eat. He said a few words to the opera troupe and then left with Shang Junlin. "I was scared to death just now." The woman in blue patted her chest. "With the emperor here, I didn't even dare to breathe loudly. I didn't expect that the first meeting with the emperor would be under such circumstances." The slightly older man sighed. Their opera troupe specialized in serving the imperial family. When the previous emperor was on the throne, he liked to enjoy life. The opera troupe often went in and out of the palace. Later, the new emperor who ascended the throne didn't like to enjoy life, so the opera troupe was completely idle. He had taken over the position of the troop leader from his master after the new emperor ascended the throne. He had thought that he would be able to show off his skills and bring the troop to greater heights, but the truth was that the troop had been silent in his hands until now. The troop leader instructed the people below to continue preparing for the new show. This was their only chance. Whether or not they could make a beautiful comeback depended on this. "It is our honor that Your Highness is willing to give us this opportunity. Everyone, cheer up. We must complete this matter perfectly and live up to Your Highness' expectations." Yes, those who were able to enter this troupe were all ambitious. To be able to provide entertainment for the royal family, they had to be the best troupe in the capital. In the past, they didn't have this opportunity, but now that they did, they had to perform well and not tarnish the reputation of the troupe. Eunuch Ming had left and returned. The troop leader asked nervously, "I wonder if Eunuch Ming has any instructions?" Although they rarely went in and out of the palace, they still knew that Eunuch Ming was the emperor's favorite person. "I don't dare to give instructions. His Majesty specifically sent me here to tell you that after you have finished transcribing Your Highness's script, remember to hand it over to His Majesty." Eunuch Ming smiled kindly. "I understand. So it was because of this matter." The troop leader let out a sigh of relief. "You must do it as soon as possible. His Majesty doesn't like Your Highness's things to be in the hands of others for too long." Eunuch Ming emphasized. "Yes, yes." The troop leader wiped the sweat from his forehead and watched Eunuch Ming leave. "Troop leader, why did His Majesty suddenly ask for the script back?" The man in pink walked over with a puzzled expression. "Don't worry about it so much. Find someone with good handwriting and transcribe the script first." In just a short while, the troop leader had already seen how much His Majesty cared about this emperor. It wasn't surprising that he would ask for the script that Your Highness had personally written. "I'll do it. I can also deepen my understanding of the role." The man in pink volunteered. He was playing one of the main characters and had a lot of scenes. He really needed to understand the script very well. The troop leader hesitated for a moment before agreeing. The man in pink happily took the script and went to transcribe it. The others looked enviously at the back of the man in pink. They had all been retrained in the troupe. They had never entered the palace and had never seen the nobles in the palace. "Before we came, the teachers in the troupe warned us that we must be very, very careful after entering the palace. The slightest carelessness will cause us to make mistakes. At that time, It would be a small matter if something happened to us, but if we implicated the troop, it wouldn't be too much to ask for our deaths. As a result, I've always been very nervous. After coming here, I realized that it was completely different from what the teachers said. The youth who spoke was about 16 or 17 years old. His face still had a hint of immaturity and his eyes were clear. Me too. When I entered the palace, I had to be very careful with every step. I was afraid that I would take a wrong step. When I was waiting to see Your Highness, I was so nervous that my heart almost stopped. After seeing Your Highness, I realized that Your Highness is completely different from the nobles that the teachers said. He is approachable and doesn't put on any airs. If there is something that we don't understand, he will explain it to us. I just plucked up my courage to ask Your Highness a question. Your Highness' voice is really nice to hear. The youth who spoke laughed. I shouldn't have hesitated just now. Otherwise, I would have been able to ask Your Highness a question. It doesn't matter. Your Highness will definitely come again in the future. We still have a chance. Your Highness is beautiful, has a nice voice, and is talented. No wonder Your Highness is always favored. I envy Nan Xiao. He asked Your Highness a lot of questions today, and Your Highness answered all of them for him. Now, he can even transcribe the script. I also want to. Who doesn't want to? But our handwriting is not as good as Nan Xiao's. When the troop leader told us to practice our handwriting, we shouldn't have been lazy. The others nodded in agreement. Today's experience fully showed that good handwriting was really important. Before the new drama was finished, they needed to live here. Considering that most of the people who came were young, Xinyu specially ordered the kitchen to make some delicious food for them. After Xinyu entered the palace, the craftsmanship of the imperial chefs in the palace skyrocketed. Not to mention other things, they could be said to be handy when it came to cooking delicious food. With Xunyu's instructions, the deliciousness of the food the troop ate in the palace was far better than outside. Master, when you came to the palace before, did you eat such delicious food? The large table of food was finished. The youths who were full collapsed on the chairs and became more and more curious about the senior in the palace. The middle-aged man who was called Master was silent for a while. No, these should be specially ordered by Your Highness. In the eyes of Your Highness, they were just servants. The food they ate was not much better than the palace servants. How could they be treated like today? It was not a secret that Xinyu summoned the performers to Yuzhong Palace. Although they did not know what Xinyu's purpose was, the ministers who heard the news still frowned. How can Your Majesty be so mischievous? The north is facing a drought, and you still condone Your Highness to enjoy himself? Your Majesty has favored the legitimate son of Count North for a long time. If you don't like it, you can impeach him. Now, who dares to impeach this matter? Look at what happened to the previous imperial censors. The ones who impeached the most ruthlessly have long disappeared from the court. Are you going to let Your Majesty be so mischievous? What do you think, Prime Minister? Is Your Majesty ignoring the court, or what? Did Your Highness summon the troop into the palace affect the government? Has His Majesty been too lazy to enjoy himself and ignore political affairs? Your Highness has been in the palace for so long. Have you done anything harmful to Dahuan? The Prime Minister's series of questions made the ministers confused. They murmured, "No, that's it. I say, you are all idle. You keep an eye on the affairs of the harem every day. Have you finished the government affairs in your hands? Have you understood the specific measures regarding the donation? Don't make me teach you step by step." The Prime Minister, who was almost crazy with work, really couldn't stand these people who didn't do proper business. Several officials were asked until their faces turned red. They lowered their heads and went back to do their own things. Yuzhong Palace. After the meal, Xinyu lay on Shang Junlin's lap and read a novel. The novel was bought from outside the palace. After knowing Xinyu's preferences, there would be palace servants who were responsible for purchasing the latest novel for Xinyu every month. After half a year, Xinyu had finished reading all the novels in the palace's library. When I went to the small theater, what was you talking about with the woman in pink? Xinyu was reading something interesting and was interrupted. She was stunned. What woman in pink? After asking, she realized what Shang Junlin was asking. She explained with a smile. That was a man. It's just that his frame was small and he was short. He was one of the main characters. He was asking me some things about the play. There are so many people. Why did he ask you? If you can't understand, you can just ask someone else. Shang Junlin twirled a strand of Shan Yu's hair around his fingertips. Why is your majesty so unreasonable? Shan Yu raised his head and looked at Shang Junlin with interest. Your majesty only saw him. Before your majesty came, many people also asked me questions. According to your majesty's idea, these people should be replaced? Shang Junlin pursed his lips as he imagined that scene. Shan Yu raised his hand and poked Shang Junlin's chin. Is your majesty angry? I'm not. The next time I go there, I'll accompany you. Shang Junlin knew how good Ayu was. It was normal for such a good Ayu to be liked by many people. He just felt unhappy that his treasure was being peeped at by others. You're really not angry? Shan Yu raised his head and asked. No, I'm not angry at Ayu for this kind of thing. Shang Junlin denied. Okay then, Shan Yu deliberately dragged out his tone. I originally wanted to kiss your majesty if you were angry. Since your majesty isn't angry, I'm angry. Shang Junlin suddenly interrupted Shan Yu's words. Ayu, I'm angry. Ha ha ha. Shan Yu shook with laughter on Shang Junlin's legs. Your majesty just said that you wouldn't be angry over this kind of thing. I said that I wouldn't be angry at you, but I didn't say that I wouldn't be angry at others. Seeing that scene, Shang Junlin almost couldn't suppress the violence in his heart. Of course, he wouldn't blame Ayu. He wouldn't be angry at Ayu. He only blamed those who deliberately approached Ayu. If Shan Yu hadn't noticed his arrival and stopped him, Shang Junlin didn't know what he would have done. The violence in his heart could only be soothed by Shan Yu. Shang Junlin stared fixedly at Shan Yu. The affection in his eyes was like thick ink that couldn't be melted. His pupils were originally pitch black. When he stared at someone so intently, that person's reflection was imprinted in his eyes. It was as if he wanted to suck that person in. Shan Yu was stared at by him and slowly stopped laughing. He could feel the drowning feelings in Shang Junlin's eyes. He propped himself up with one hand and hooked Shang Junlin's neck with the other, slowly approaching him. Then I'll kiss your majesty. Your majesty won't be angry, okay? Chapter 107. Shan Yu's voice was very low. Every word seemed to have a hook, drilling into Shang Junlin's heart. Shang Junlin supported Shan Yu's waist with one hand, supporting the young man's body. Shan Yu saw that he would not fall, so he put his hands on Shang Junlin's shoulders. The distance between the two was getting closer and closer. They looked at each other, and each other's figure was reflected in their eyes. Their lips touched. The tremor suddenly increased. Shan Yu slowly closed his eyes and pecked the man's lips. Shang Junlin put his other hand on Shan Yu's waist, and his fingers clasped her flexible waist. He resisted the urge to tear the young man apart and swallow him whole, allowing the other party to touch his lips lightly. It was like drinking poison to quench thirst. Shan Yu knew that the other party would not be satisfied with such a touch, so he slowly pried open the other party's lips and entered. Similar to Shan Yu's usual style, there was no straightforward violence. Every movement was extremely seductive, and it was likely to lead people into the abyss of desire. Shang Junlin's breathing became heavier and heavier. When Shan Yu was about to withdraw, he took the initiative, captured the young man's lips, and heavily invaded. His attack was fiercer than ever before. His white and slender fingers weakly grabbed the black clothes on the man's shoulders, leaving wrinkles. However, at this time, no one cared about the marks left on the expensive clothes. After the kiss, Shan Yu leaned on the man's shoulder, panting slightly. Your Majesty, are you still angry? Shang Junlin's eyes were dark, and his voice was slightly hoarse. If I say that I'm still angry, will you coax me again? What do you think, Your Majesty? Shan Yu's voice was lazy and a little hoarse. After his breathing calmed down, Shan Yu turned over and leaned on Shang Junlin's chest. The man put his arm around the waist and put it on Shan Yu's lower abdomen. Shan Yu glanced at the table. Shang Junlin's half-approved booklets were spread open on the table. There was also a thick stack of booklets waiting to be approved. Your Majesty, Please approve the memorials first. Xinyu pointed at the pile of unfinished memorials. You, accompany me. Shang Junlin rested his head on Xian Yu's shoulder, reached out to pick up a memorial and spread it open. This booklet was written by the Prime Minister, and it was about the examination of officials. Every year in Dahuan, there would be an official assessment. Based on the results of the assessment, the next year's official would be promoted or demoted. In the past, this matter was handled by the cabinet. The examination of the officials was set to take place in the winter, and the content of the examination was the performance of the officials for the year. Specialized officials would report the situation to the cabinet, and after the cabinet discussed it, they would report it to the emperor, who would make the final decision. During this period of time, the prime minister was very busy, especially when he found that some officials were slacking off all day. He felt that it was intolerable. He directly asked the emperor to reinvestigate the assessment of these officials in the past years. At the end of the memorial, he said that he hoped that the emperor could send a few useful people to help him. The other two ministers in the cabinet were also busy. They were busy with the affairs of the court and the family. They had to determine the amount of materials and gold to be donated before the donation was announced to the public. They couldn't let outsiders look down on the aristocratic families, and they couldn't let the emperor be afraid of them because of this. In addition, Shang Junlin was more assured to let the prime minister handle this matter. Compared to the other two ministers in the cabinet, the prime minister's shoulders were heavier. As for the officials, Your Majesty might as well send He Chengyu and the others to the prime minister's side. They can help the prime minister and also get some practice in advance. Xinyu thought of He Chengyu and the others who were still in the Hanlin Academy and suggested, I also have the same idea. In comparison, the Hanlin Academy is currently the most leisurely. The court is short of manpower, so they can get used to it in advance. The next day, He Chengyu, Jiang Huiqing, and Fang Jia, who were on duty in the Hanlin Academy as usual, all received the imperial edict from the palace. The three of them were stopped at the entrance of the Hanlin Academy. After the imperial edict was read, the eunuch who announced the edict urged them, The three of you should quickly pack up and follow me to the prime minister's side. Jiang Huiqing and He Chengyu looked at each other and saw the confusion in each other's eyes. Although they didn't know what was going on, they quickly packed up and were sent to the prime minister's side. The prime minister was sitting in the study dealing with official business. When he saw them, he said faintly, Since the emperor sent you here, you should do your work well and don't worry about anything else. Look over there. These are the things you need to deal with today. Go. After that, the prime minister lowered his head and continued to do his work. Jiang Huiqing looked at the place the prime minister pointed at and saw 5 stacks of documents on the small table. He couldn't believe his eyes. These were the things they needed to deal with today? A few days later, Jiang Huiqing rubbed his sore neck as he walked out of the prime minister's residence. These past few days, I've realized how difficult it is to be a good official. Every day, he had to deal with endless documents. Compared to working in the prime minister's residence, his days at the Hanlin Academy couldn't be more relaxed. The prime minister really doesn't have it easy, Fang Jia sighed. I always thought that my father was very busy. I didn't expect the prime minister to be even more busy. Although it's a bit tiring, I've learned a lot these past few days. Other than being serious about official business, the prime minister is very easy to get along with. The officials of the imperial court had also noticed that the prime minister had been following the top 3 of this year's batch. He brought them with him wherever he went. Later on, he even brought them with him to morning court. There were some people who complained about this, but since the emperor didn't blame them, they couldn't say anything. The 2 memorials written by official Fang arrived at Shang Junlin's desk one after another, explaining the true situation in Subei. The first one arrived earlier, and the other one arrived at the palace 7 days later through official channels. This one was deliberately released by Fang Jun to deceive others. Shang Junlin finished reading the 2 memorials and picked up the one that arrived later. It says that everything in Subei is normal, the disaster situation isn't serious, and the supplies they brought are just enough. Then this one is about the suspicious points in Subei. Xinyu picked up the other one, but didn't open it. How's the situation in the Subei army? If there were only problems within the officials, the matter would be easier to solve. If there were also problems within the Subei army, it would be troublesome. Fang Jun hasn't found any abnormalities for the time being. When I was in Subei, I separated the Subei army from the Subei army's official system. The two sides operate independently and don't interfere with each other. Shang Junlin had done this because he didn't feel at ease leaving the Subei army in the hands of the Subei army's officials. Your Majesty didn't send Gu Huai and the hidden dragon guards just to secretly protect official Fang, right? Xinyu walked around and sat down next to Shang Junlin. You knows me well. Their true goal is the Subei army. I need to understand the situation in the Subei army. Subei was an important barrier between Dahuan and the northern desert. The existence of the Subei army deterred the northern desert from sending troops south. Every time the northern desert army tried to invade Dahuan, they would be stopped outside the pass by the Subei army. Late at night, Subei men in black sneaked into the Subei army like ghosts and didn't make a sound. They were all wearing black masks, which reflected a cold metallic glow under the faint moonlight. Who is it? Shu. A silver dagger was pressed against his neck, and a cold aura enveloped him. Who are you? Do you know that trespassing into a military camp is a serious crime? Shang Junlin didn't comment on the Prime Minister's comfortable life. Wei Qing also wrote to me. Other than the large amount of documents they have to deal with every day, the Prime Minister takes good care of them in other aspects. In just a few days, the three of them had matured a lot. With their help, the Prime Minister's progress had also sped up. When Shun Yu's play was performed outside the palace, the donation policy would officially be implemented. He's still writing to you? Shang Junlin held Shun Yu's waist and pinched the soft flesh on his waist. When will you write a letter to me? Didn't the outside of the palace send in some peach blossom letters last time? You can use those to write. No wonder your Majesty looked at them for so long last time. Why didn't you tell me at that time? Shun Yu turned his head to look at Shang Junlin with a teasing look in his eyes. Also, the people in the opera troupe said that your Majesty took away my manuscript. Why does your Majesty want the original manuscript? You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.